Carbon dating is now not able to be used. It's not reliable. Only where you've got something like Göbekli Tepe can you trust the date. Everything else should be older. And this is transformational. It basically means we are living where there is clearly been cultures that are much older than we think they are. The Great Flood could have made younger everything that wasn't highly protected on the surface of the Earth. And this has profound implications for dating ancient structures. And because it only ran for 2 minutes, I accelerated that decay rate by 348 million times. I expect lightning to produce iron-rich crenellated spheres, and here we have the proof. So this changes the cosmic impact theory. The elements on Earth almost certainly were not coming from supernova. They are synthesized mostly in the violence of the early years of this Earth. The brain, when it's doing consciousness tasks, is producing toroidal moments. I don't want to say this really because we only saw a sign of it, but we saw uranium in there. This means we can make any element we want. We literally have the power, what I call God's with a little g, toolbox. So what I'm focusing on is a technology that will fix that waste potentially in situ for a thorium reactor. So this radiation that Ivan Filimenko, and Ivan Filimenko spent time in a gulag because he railed against the Soviet Union because he said this krypton-85 that's going in the atmosphere will increase cancer rates. And they actually locked him up for being vocal about it. No, we need to make our bombs and we don't want the population to think we're not doing the right thing for our population, if you know what I mean. So he actually suffered for being open and honest about this contamination in the environment that people were able to breathe in because krypton's very heavy. It would lie down low as well as, ionize the atmosphere. So if we have a technology that is able to clean up a normal fission reactor's failure, a molten salt reactor, a thorium reactor, fails safe. Like what happens is if it gets too much reaction, it stops. And if the containment breaks, the molten salt cools and it stops and it's stuck where it is. So it doesn't fail in the same way that we saw in Fukushima and Chernobyl. But when those kind of reactors fail, or you have the product at the end, the waste product, it still has this radioactive material in it that has these long half-lives. And, salt does dissolve in water and could leach into the ground and stuff. If we can fix that whilst the reactor is running, then we enable an incredibly bright future for humanity. I'm talking 1,000 years of the whole world having basically unlimited energy, just from technology that already exists. But you remove the thing that stops humans, generally, and politicians from wanting it to be installed. Because what are we going to do with the waste? If you solve that problem, we have unlimited energy from all, perspectives.
I mean, what do we do with the waste today that we have from energy?
Pile it up.
Yeah.
That's what happens. So they find ways of like fusing it into glass, or they put it in concrete vessels and they bury it in like granite caves and stuff. And, when you look at something like plutonium, if you're not putting it into a bomb, and it'll still have the same half-life in there, but let's say you put it into the ground, it has a half-life of something like 273,000 years. Are you going to be able to guarantee, when you have a political cycle that seems to run at a 2 to 4 year cadence, are you going to be able to guarantee that in 100,000 years' time, someone's not going to know where that is, dig it up and make a bomb from it? Or maybe make a dirty bomb, which will pollute a large environment for a long period of time. So, those things need to be fixed.
I should have warned the audience not to try to listen to this episode above 1.0. I'm listening to this at 1.0 and having a difficult time. If there's a way that we can point this to like 0.75, Ryan, I think I would have a much easier time keeping up. But unfortunately, that's not possible for the host. So you are looking at, I'm going to try to do my best to keep up with you today. These are always, I love having you on the show because it's always like the most challenging mental exercise that I could ever possibly try to have. And so it's a good thing to do once every year or two.
Full respect.
Yeah.
And if there's anything you need further explanation of, as I say to anyone who is having to suffer my cadence as well, in that sense, please ask for clarification.
Of course, we'll do for sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's an incredible mission that you're on to attempt to find energy that is going to be clean and not pollute the earth. So where are you then on that step, on that process?
So during this process, I visited a guy called Suhas Ralkar, and this will become relevant to what we may talk about later on. Suhas Ralkar is, I think, nearly 80, if he's still with us. I haven't checked before today, but anyway, he's nearly 80. And he is in Mumbai, and he spent his early male foundational years in England developing some of the first ultrasound devices. And you've had children, I've had children, and typically you go for your scans early on.
My wife did.
Yeah. And basically they take a device and it beams ultrasound in, and there's reflections that come back, and that gives you an image of what's in the abdominal cavity. There's other ways that ultrasound works. Essentially, you can have these things like maybe, unfortunately, people get kidney stones, typically men, and they have this thing where they have an explosive event, and it has a parabolic kind of dish, and that focuses that sound into the zone of where this little piece of calcite or calcium ball is, and smashes it up so you can pass it rather painfully. These are sound in effectively a fluid medium. Your body is mostly water. And so when I was with him, I saw different types of cavitation technology. And he showed, he was actually taking some process. He developed all these technologies based on sound, ultrasound. And if you ever had a car made of rolled steel, like the body's made of rolled mild steel and it's painted or whatever, this is produced in huge foundries. It's on big rolls, but to protect it from rusting, because it's mild steel, they will coat it in animal fat, typically in India. And then before it gets, for instance, zinc dipped to make your filing cabinet or whatever, they pass it through something that tries to remove the fat. And so he was developing a technology where they used ultrasound, and it basically, like cleaning your teeth, it removed this fat so that when it went into the zinc bath, it was completely clean, and the zinc could adhere as the sacrificial anode. So what he found was, he found these white spots were being produced on this iron, and when he analyzed them, they found it contained oxyapatite, which was containing elements that do not exist in the water, the fat, or the in the steel. So where is it coming from? That started him on a whole journey about investigating whether ultrasound could lead to synthesis of new elements and also potentially excess heat. Well, he did find that to be the case. And I visited him in 2000.
And is that generally accepted as scientific fact now amongst normie scientists, that is the case? That
cavitation can produce new elements?
New elements.
It is, because, in my view, a paper that I published with Binjuan Huang, who was the 50-year thermodynamics professor at Taipei University, he did a presentation in 2019 in Assisi in Italy, of which I was present. And I asked him at the end of the conference, you can go and see the recording online, and I said, look, have you looked for elements? And I expect you to see elements near these kind of cavitation spot that you found. And then in the subsequent conference, which I wasn't able to attend, it was in Shanghai, I think, he had found carbon and oxygen. Now, oxygen's obviously in the water, but where's the carbon coming from? Because it's not in the copper pipe and it's not in the water. So where's that coming from? So within 3 days, I published a hypothesis where the carbon would be coming from the fusion of hydrogen that's in the water and oxygen into oxygen-17. Then 2 oxygen-17s would fuse and then fission into carbon-12, which is the most abundant isotope of carbon, and an isotope of neon. And so I did that. I did not know that he would take that to heart and investigate it. He worked with the leading mass spectrometer company, Mastech, in the semiconductor industry in Taiwan. And we all know they produce the best semiconductors in the world. These are very keen on extremely precise mass spectrometry. So what am I talking about with mass spectrometry? You ionize a gas or a water vapor, for instance, And then it goes down what's called a drift tube, where you've got an electrical potential. And depending on how far it gets, you know what the masses are of the various elements. Do you know what they found? They found carbon-12 and neon-22, which is the rarest isotope of neon. Without seeing neon, and without neon-20, and without seeing neon-21. And that is the most likely reaction, according to my hypothesis, of what would be produced from fusion and fission of 2 oxygen-17s to carbon-12 and neon-22. So this became a paper that we published in Nature Scientific Reports. That was published on the 2nd of January 2024. And that has become, for its age, in the top 3% of all papers published in all the journals that are tracked by that publishing group. And it's a lot of his work, but it's interesting to have an idea. But there are so many people. An idea is almost too cheap in the world. It takes someone like him and his sponsor, Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin is like the Donald Trump of New Taipei. He's like got all these skyscrapers he's built and so on. So he's got the most amazing sponsor. Actually, developed the first high-powered 400-watt LEDs using vapor chamber technology that was used in Russian Soviet space technology, and he kind of brought that in. They still run now. Actually, in some of Mr. Lin's buildings, they've got these 400-watt LEDs that were built nearly quarter of a century ago, still working. And so they had a great relationship from that, and he's been sponsoring him. And it's one of the largest systematic studies in the field of what I call coherent energy transformations now, formerly low energy nuclear reactions, formerly cold fusion. And basically this paper showed that you are producing non-natural isotopes. So neon-22, in exclusion of neon-21 and neon-20, is not natural. And this is more interesting than even producing elements from scratch or from other elements. You're producing something that isn't normally found in that ratio in nature. So this is a very high signal. And commensurate with that, there is excess heat. And the excess heat can be produced by that reaction. And so we have excess heat and so on. Now, producing excess heat is not new. Cavitation has shown to produce excess heat many times before. An example would be Kladov. He had 2 patents in the Soviet area in 1982-83. And then he submitted a patent and was awarded in the European Union and the Russian Federation in 1992. I've remastered that patent, but basically they're taking a rotary cavitator with holes in it such that it produces a lot of cavitation structures. And he found a COP that's a coefficient of performance. You put electrical energy in, let's say 1 kilowatt, and you get a number of multiples of kilowatts out in thermal energy. He found that if you added aluminium and silicon in there in the form of aluminosilicate, like a basic fine clay, your pots might be made of it if they're fine pots, you know, the actual material you start with, aluminosilicate. These fuse typically towards iron. So 2 silicons makes iron 54, and iron can be formed from both silicon and aluminium in different combinations. So, sorry, two aluminium 27s make iron 54, and combinations of them and some fission reactions produce iron. And iron is like a kind of almost a bit of a dead end in these processes. Well, he found that if he put aluminosilicate into his devices, put 70 kilowatts into the motor that's driving the cavitator, he got 830 kilowatts of thermal energy out, and a COP of well over 11. That is transformational. That was prior to 1992. So yes, it has the ability. And there are other people like Schaefer, and there are also people like Griggs. Griggs, in the early 1990s, you can see him on the side of the MIT conference with Gene Malov, and I published this video recently, where he's talking about the fact that we're seeing excess heat, and he's suggesting they're seeing transmutation and weird effects like punching through solid lumps of material. No one was interested for 2 years when he was saying this is creating more energy out than I'm putting in electrically, right? No one wanted to know if it was transmuting matter. When he said it was just as efficient as a normal electric heater, but it just didn't get caked up in calcium deposits, right? He then built a huge company that set his family up for many generations. And he's not with us anymore, but you can still buy hydrosonics technology out there. But they don't claim it produces any excess heat. But I know Russian researcher who's currently in, I think it's Kazakhstan, and he's testing a device right now, one of the commercial Russian technologies that are available that produce excess heat from cavitation. So cavitation does do synthesis of elements, and it produces energy. And we're going to get onto this a little later, but everyone's asking why things in the world shit keeps getting older, right? And I think it's related to this cavitation phenomena, that things and other related technologies and aspects of what nature does, like lightning, and we're going to see physical examples of that in tests that we've done for the first time on this podcast. So it's a pleasure to be able to share it on this podcast. But essentially, the Great Flood, as it were, for whatever reason you say that was caused, could have made younger everything that wasn't highly protected on the surface of the Earth. And this has profound implications for dating ancient structures.
And by made younger, how does that work exactly then?
So what happens, if everyone's seen a smoke ring coming out of your mouth, yeah. The most extreme version of that would be the mushroom cloud. The mushroom is a manifestation of this process. Its chi energy is able to force up, and it produces the thing, and then it fans out. The mushroom cloud is the expression of nature and one of its most intense energy structures. But it's as above, so below. So essentially, in a mushroom cloud, there will be loads of different hydrodynamics going on. What do I mean by hydrodynamics? I mean a gas, a fluid, or a plasma. They're all hydrodynamic mediums. In fact, the ether itself is nominally considered, it could be a hydrodynamic medium. And so this produces a particular pattern where it focuses energy up the stem into the center, like this mushroom here. Same in a mushroom cloud. And what I believe that I found, and I've argued based on physical evidence. In fact, I derived the structure from looking at physical evidence on multiple independent technologies, and repeatedly it can be produced, that it seems to concentrate into what's called a phase singularity. This is a thing which ends up as it's just it's a monopole, but it's not a real monopole. It's what they call a topological monopole. So you can go and look at work by Aalto University, published in Nature and Science, both in 2009 and 2014. One of those is in one paper and one journal, and one is in the other. But anyway, and they're trying to create these in coherent matter in the form of Bose-Einstein condensates. We're able to create the same kind of effect, but on a much more macro scale, not the size of a nuclear detonation, but things that are actually, you can even see them because they can be in the 200 micron or 400 micron. They actually look like a speck of dust. You can physically see them with the naked eye. But many of them are smaller. They're typically in the 5, 10, 20, 50 micron scale. These things are magnetic cores. And the magnetic strength in those cores can be so high that it causes ordinary matter to literally fall apart. And it falls apart in a wide degree of levels. The most simplest way is a tornado. A tornado will actually produce these same electrodynamic effects, and it makes matter fall apart. It does weird things. You see these like container from a 36-wheeler. It's lifted up very slowly, and it's gently laid down. Well, if it's got a 350-mile-an-hour wind, why isn't it flying sideways very quickly? No, it's lifting up, and then it's flying down. What kind of pressure dynamic would do that? No, it's a thing that's manipulating the thing that manifests gravity, and it's producing essentially a 0-point gradient or a gravity gradient into this core, and it does everything from cause water to disassociate all the way through to causing nuclei and the nucleons, that is neutrons and protons, to fall apart. When it goes into the core, the pressure in there is effectively equivalent to neutron stars or black holes, effectively, somewhere between. These things that, the black hole we got behind us. And why is that? Well, people think it's only able to be done by gravity, but gravity is 40 orders of magnitude weaker than the electromagnetic force. And so if gravity can do it, if we have a bunching of electrons or an intense electric discharge, why can we not do it with that? And in fact, Takaaki Matsumoto, a Japanese scientist who I've been remastering his book from 2000, he actually showed this with his what he called in the 2021 unpublished paper his favorite experiment. And it's so simple. You take a 1 millimeter piece of metal wire and you do a pulse discharge through it, let's say from your 110 volt socket Don't do this at home, kids. Okay, have adult supervision, but you can do it. Even young people can do this, but you play safe when you're looking with mains voltages.
Has your kids been doing this?
My kids have been doing the ultrasound experiment, and they can do this. That can be done by someone from 3 and up. Typically 5 years old is a good starting age to do that experiment. That produces yin-yang structures that desynthesizes matter and synthesizes matter. Desynthesizes in the yang. The yang always breaks down things in the environment. It gives it over to the yin. The yin assembles that, condenses it. That is the black, the dark, and then it creates new life from it. And that's essentially what's going on. You have this yin-yang process going on. And essentially, any matter that goes in can be transitioned at the extremis into prima materia. That is what Takaaki Matsumoto calls a mini bang. And then as it comes back out of this magnetic monopole-like structure, it is reborn. And it then forms ordinary nuclei, typically protons, which become hydrogen, atomic hydrogen, and then helium, and then carbon and oxygen. And if you look at the Earth's crust, most of it is oxygen straight away. And then the other elements it produces are silicon and aluminium and calcium and iron. And when you look at the elements that this system produces, it's basically almost all of the mass of the Earth. And so if Ryan could honor me or help me here, if you can bring up the slides from Matsumoto, I think it's called reaction.
So are you saying that the Earth was created through this process?
Yes. Or the constitution of the Earth. So this is Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto. This is around circa 2000. And he does this graph here on what he believes what was called at the time cold fusion is. And so your high temperature fusion, which they're trying to create in these field reverse configurations by putting 2 energy solitons and smacking them together in what Trump's invested into, or the tokamaks, they're trying to raise the temperature to compensate for the lack of gravity. And they're smashing these things together kinetically to do what's called hot fusion, a high temperature fusion. And that's notionally what the sun is producing. And so if you look at the graph here, down on the left-hand side, you've got the pressure going up on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, you've got like the lifetime of stars in inverted commas, distance from the Earth. And then he's saying that the neutron star and the black and white hole are actually part of cold fusion. Okay? They're not radiating heat. In fact, you don't get a lot of radiation of massive amounts of heat from a black hole, do you? It's kind of like you don't get any light coming out of it. That's the point. Now, if you go to the next slide, Ryan. Yeah, so this is all in Japanese, which is essentially the same chart.
It's not far off from English for me, actually. It's very similar.
It is when I'm using English, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So if you go to the next slide, this is a bad Google Translate image translation, so it helps us here. What he's added in is what he observed is the starting point of the cold fusion, which is that purple circle where he has element creation coming out of it. That's added on. And you can see that the pressure is higher than even a neutron star, but below a black hole. But he's saying that that is the start point of this process. And as you move over to the right, they're all manifestations of this same electrodynamic-driven process, with the farthest being the white hole. I would argue the black hole and the white hole could be switched around, because the white hole actually is the yang. It disassembles matter and produces a lot of light. Going into the black hole is the white hole feeds the black hole. It's almost the reverse of what you think.
What is the white hole? What is that? Where do we see white holes?
Well, some people argue that maybe suns are actually white holes, or
stars.
He's got them merged together. So if you look at the image of a black hole behind us, maybe there's the yin and the yang inside the black hole, and through its azimuth, that is the line through the center between the yin and yang, it gives out energy in the form of X-rays and so on. So they're white in the sense that they're photons, but they're not white in the visible spectrum. They're gamma rays or X-rays or ultraviolet rays. And you can see these on different spectral imaging in some of the telescopes that are out there coming out of black holes.
Where do they... coming out of black holes.
They're emerging, yeah. So kind of like the two are kind of sometimes basically together.
Okay.
And maybe when you often get galaxies that are paired, and maybe it's kind of... There's this continuous repeating from alpha to omega and back again, this cycle of life, and it works at every level, as above, so below, in all parts of nature. And so they are at the upper end of this. But the idea that you can only produce these things due to gravitational effects, I think conclusively the work of Takaaki Matsumoto showed is not the case. And in fact, actually, a couple of people approached him, and I've got the documents with the letters to him and his consideration of those letters, that essentially what's going on in the core of the Earth is doing this same effect. And so earthquakes and volcanoes are producing the same kind of processes in the Earth, and they are actually synthesizing the elements. And so I will be sharing some of this in the conference in a couple of weeks' time in Italy. But he actually took some of the same radioactive, radio emulsions. These are kind of like films that are designed to see particle tracks. Okay, they're typically a sheet of A4 which has two types of emulsion on either side, and he puts a stack of them together. And also pieces of metal. He put this by Mount Utsu, which was predicted to erupt, and it did. And on those witness materials, he saw the same things that he was producing in cold fusion experiments. That is to say, he has categorical proof that the Earth does this same element synthesis process, and the actors that do this work are the same structures, right? And they work on all kinds of levels. So he has a photo, which is not his photo, where he sees this helical beam coming from the ground up into the sky that then dissipates out. And it's like a condensation of cloud, but it's like a twisted vortex, two spirals going together. And recently that's been observed. And you typically observe these before earthquakes. They're coming out of the ground. And these are macro ball lightnings interacting with the vapor in the atmosphere as they're leaving the ground and coming up. What he observed on these radiographic emulsions are miniature versions of these, and then them blowing up and producing these helical beams, but on micron level scales. So they're all scales you can possibly imagine. And so what does this mean? This means that the elements on Earth almost certainly were not coming from supernova. They are synthesized either mostly in the violence of the early years of this Earth, or in the eons, the epochs that have passed since. The cavitation of water going through cracks in the ground in springs. The spring is an amazing thing. People assume that all of the elements that are coming out of a hot spring are dissolved from the Earth. But could it be that they are synthesized by these same processes and, yes, later dissolved or just carried as they are produced into the thermal spa? That's one thing. And then you see these beautiful landscapes around volcanoes where you can literally grow anything. I know you've been to Pompeii, and I was there recently. And when you look down from the south rim of Pompeii, in that Vesuvius, and you look down onto the ash fields, effectively. You've got Pompeii where there's no lights or buildings except the old ones, but you have this sea of greenhouses where you can basically grow anything. And I think it's two factors that's going on here. One, you've got the massive amounts of rich minerals that are able to provide everything that life needs and allow it to grow. You've obviously got the climate, which is good, but underneath the ground, because they have a supervolcano there, and actually Vesuvius is still active, and nearby you've got Campi Flegrei, this supervolcano. Underneath that whole area is this process going on, and it's firing continuously these energy structures up, making, volcanic type personalities that are very hedonistic, which the whole area is famous for. It's actually energizing the populace that lives there. And I can go into, potentially life extension from these kind of things and also risks, but I believe that people that are living in volcanic regions, they have long lives, not just because of the thermal spas and visiting those. I think they're constantly being dosed with qi, condensed qi, right? Now,
and we talked about that on the first episode.
Yeah. And it just dawned on me that this place is so vivacious, it's so vital. Like the seas are productive, the land is productive, and it's not just the mineral content. Because when you look at, for instance, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, they produce most of the nitrogen in the ground. Okay, they're fantastically capable of doing it. Okay, is a byproduct of their metabolism. Now, if they've got something that accelerates their internal energy to provide a yield of nitrogen, and that's constantly coming, these structures themselves can fix nitrogen, right? But if they stimulate the growth of the bacteria and the vitality of the bacteria, then they can fix far more nitrogen. And there are actually technologies that are available in Ukraine. They came from old Soviet Russian patents, where they are using electrical discharges and cavitators and a soil sample from the soil you want to produce fertilizer for. They run it through this, produce a meter cubed of energized water with bacteria. You put it in a tank, you fill it with more water, and the bacteria go absolutely bonkers, producing the nitrogen. And then you take that water, you spray it on your field, and it's exactly matched to the crops, so to the land that you're actually farming. And it's like free fertilizer. Once you do the process, you can keep diluting it, and the bacteria keep going nuts because the energy that they've been excited with is so pervasive. That's my understanding. So I think we're on a verge of a deep understanding of why you typically get these centenarians living in these volcanic regions and so on, where, they've got all this risk, but why does everyone migrate to these places? Why do they feel so vital when they're there? And I mean all kinds of vital. If you're an angry person, you're more angry there. But if you're a loving person or a passionate person, yeah, you get it on. And it's why. Is it because you're on holiday, or is it because, it's a little bit of something in the air? I think probably there's a bit of both going on. Anyway, so... and I think there are technologies that will be able to derive from this that will do life extension, will allow people to be actually energized, not from pure calories. I mean from something that's at a deeper level of what actually drives nature. And so, to cut a long story short, stuff goes in. Whatever that stuff is, it comes out normally as the elements in your body, typically carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Most of your body is carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. The things that also come out are magnesium, sodium, chlorine, potassium, calcium. Those are most of the rest of your body, phosphorus, those kind of things. And it is basically the flower of life.
Wow. Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just take a second and just kind of, before we go forward and add more onto this, because I know we're going to be doing a lot of that. Why don't we just kind of pause and just reframe just summarize where we are right now. So like, if I'm going to try to do a crappy job of this, then I'll go first. But we've got this cavitation process then, and the cavitation process creates new elements, and it creates excess energy in the form of heat.
Yes.
And you're saying that happens all over the planet. And that
Absolutely.
So it happens in springs near volcanoes at the center of the earth.
Water running down a stream, water crashing on the shore. You have to ask yourself, why does life start near a hydrothermal spring? Why does life like to have its offspring in a stream? Why does most of the coral reefs close to land, where there is a lot of water crashing on rock? All life likes to live where there's a lot of water activity. Why? Is it accident?
And so this excess, this byproduct then is energizing life?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's giving it the micronutrients, the newly synthesized elements that are bioavailable. That is, they're not in a piece of rock. Like, try chewing on a piece of rock. It doesn't do you a lot of good. But it might have the magnesium in there that you might be deficient in, because there's been too much potassium-based fertilizer used on the crops that are providing you your cereal grain.
I just started taking magnesium. I think it's going to help. I slept better last night, actually.
There we go.
Yeah, I think I'm probably
And
deficient.
you know why that is? Because of modern farming. Because about 52% or something like that of the calories in your body are reliant on the Haber-Bosch process, the fixing of nitrogen using gas, and it has potassium in it. And potassium, if the soil isn't managed well, you get too much potassium in your wheat, in your pasta, in whatever it is that's being grown through that process, and that reduces the amount of magnesium, so you get magnesium depleted.
And I'm glad I slept better last night. I need that sleep for this conversation. So then the challenge then for you is to harness this power somehow, and to figure out how to harness this. And then once we do that, then we have this incredible, unlimited source of natural, free energy.
We're basically all going to be able to live next to a volcano, but not. Same, but different. So you're going to be able to get the vitality, the energizing, the life-driving force that people live next to a volcano get, or those that gain access to a hot thermal spring. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence that all across the ancient world, people flocked to thermal springs. Yeah, there wasn't easy ways of getting hot water, let's face it. And in countries like Hungary, which is pretty cold in the winter, and other places where they have thermal springs, it's natural that you would do that. But they didn't call them just, it gets you hot, right? They say they're healing. And, you know, in the Czech Republic, still, if you go and have heart surgery, they will send you to a thermal spring and you have to convalesce there for 6 weeks, right? It's part of the culture. And so why? Same in Japan. Like everyone, they know that going to the thermal spring, it's like in their culture. People who do it regularly are healthier. And it's not just about the heat, it's about the mineral content. The mineral content is such that it's able to be bioavailable. But is it just the mineral content? Is in that special water actually these energy clusters, which we know we can produce, and that get bound to oxygen dissolved in water, it would appear, are they able to be absorbed into your body and are giving vitality, healing, genuinely healing? Well, if that is the case, then we really do have the potential to bring that thermal spring, bring that volcanic energy to everyone.
And so just to maybe go down the conspiracy path for a second, were any of the people that were originally working on this technology or this in the 80s and 90s, are these some of the people that I've heard of that have had these just strange deaths and come to end of life?
Well, the classic one, unfortunately, is Stanley Meyer, who did the water car. There was more that he did, to be fair, and in energy-related technologies, but he was having some new investor meeting, and he came out and said he was poisoned and basically dropped dead on the spot. Other people have suffered this, and I know that there are rules that were brought out in the 1950s, Invention Secrecy Act, and things relating to nuclear that probably are the reason behind it when people get too close. So that so much was discovered at that time on both sides of the pond that I don't think they want necessarily people to have access to, because it is hacking the root level access to how nature works. And when you know how the nature works at a fundamental level, you get all kinds of tools. And I think one thing we were talking about last night was these systems that potentially they're using, unfortunately, in weapons systems and in so-called active denial systems. There is some papers that were done in the late 1950s. And it was done at, I think, at Manchester University or somewhere in the UK. And they took a magnetron. That is something that you would have in your domestic microwave, but at a different frequency. And they took a quartz crystal. And quartz crystals, if you've got a quartz electronic watch or a timepiece of some kind, or you've got any receiver, they typically use the natural vibrations of quartz crystals cut to different thicknesses to produce a timing signal on which computers' timing is based and so forth. What they did is they took this quartz crystal and then strapped that next to a microwave chamber, and they did chirps, little pulses of microwave. And as that goes into that piezoelectric material, which quartz is, it converts that electromagnetic wave into a phonon, but a phonon with a frequency that is a sound wave, but it has a frequency at the same frequency as the electromagnetic wave. So this is ultrasound, right? Ultrasound is normally something over what you can hear. So typically that's, I mean, even if you've got really good hearing, you're not going to hear above 22 kilohertz. That's why you have, 44 kilohertz CD recordings, because it can produce 22 kilohertz signals. But something over that, but it's well over
22
that.
22 kilohertz is 22,000 hertz?
Yeah, 22,000 cycles a second. Yeah. So what we're talking about is things in the megahertz, but they are actually a sound wave. So they propagate at the speed of sound through that quartz crystal. And when they get to the interface at the other end of the quartz crystal, they produce a little pulse of the same microwave energy. It converts the sound back into electromagnetic waves. Okay, and then, but partially, it's partially reflective. So some of that vibration, which is at this megahertz frequency, comes back down the quartz crystal the opposite direction, and then it bounces off the back wall and goes back, and so it produces this diminishing return of electromagnetic pulses with the gap, which is dependent on the sound that's traveling to and from either end at the sound speed, but at a frequency that's in the megahertz of the speed of sound through the quartz crystal. So why am I talking about this? Well, we had this conversation last night about what happened with Maduro and these discombobulating technologies. And
Maduro, the Havana syndrome.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But essentially,
right. I'm with you. Venezuela. Yeah. That whole mission.
Yeah. So here's the thing. What happened was I've flown in a Chinook, and it was a bit of comedy. They thought in the Chinook that I was in, I don't know about anyone else that's been in a Chinook, but they have these big slidey doors, and in the one that we were in, we had a load of seats that were facing out to the doors. And I guess it's so that if you're flying into a place, you can shoot down or whatever, or you undo your straps and you get out. And they thought it was quite funny to fly the Chinook almost like horizontal to the ground. So I'm like dangling with my legs and arms, just held in by the strap, looking at the ground. But they're workhorses. They're low technology, relatively speaking. So it's hard to hit them with electromagnetic warfare. It's the perfect thing, but it's slow. They're sitting ducks. Even with a bullet, you can take out a helicopter. There's bits on the rotors that are very vulnerable to even being hit by a bullet. And when that goes off, the rotor cannot be adjusted and it becomes uncontrollable. So, it's a high risk going into a place where there might be a lot of troops, even with basic weapons, let alone RPGs or surface-to-air missiles. So what do? Well, there were these active denial systems, for instance, used in Australia, and they were using sound. And
there goes your views. You said the C word.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
There was an event in Australia, which was in the early 2020s. You can cut there, Ryan. in the 2020s. And so basically, they use these systems, which are like they look like little flat speakers, essentially, but you couldn't see any speaker in them. And what it was is... if you have a normal speaker, the sound will dissipate out in a kind of like a hemispherical way, and the energy at a distance will be a cube law less than it was near the source as you move further out, right? With a phased array, these are little speakers, and the speakers might not be running at the sort of ultrasound that you might have in an ultrasonic cleaner. These might be running in the megahertz, the type of frequencies that Suhas Ralka in India was using in his thermal generating reactor. He was using megahertz level sound producing speakers. And I've talked about how you can get a piece of quartz and you hit it with a microwave, and out this side it produces microwaves, but the actual thing is vibrating also physically at megahertz frequency. So it'll also produce a sound wave at megahertz frequencies, right? Now the microwave might not do anything, but the sound comes out. If you have a phased array, rather than it spreading out, what can happen is the little wave fronts interfere, where you get a crest interfering with a crest positively.
A phased array. Meaning
so imagine like a pixel arrangement, or like a pin board. One of those pin boards you push your face in and you get all the pins come out and it gives you an impression of your face. Imagine loads and loads of little speakers like that are producing, let's say, megahertz frequencies. And they send out a wavefront, and the wavefronts interfere with each other constructively to produce crests of crests and troughs of trough. And they end up by resynthesizing almost like a parallel wavefront that doesn't dissipate out. And you can direct the energy. Now,
targeted energy.
Yeah. So now there's various types of directed energy, but essentially, what these people were complaining of during these events in this so-called use of these active denial systems during this period in the early 2020s, when they were protesting, they were seeing that the tops of their feet and their shins and their faces in the bony areas and their lips were swelling up. They were getting bruising in these parts of the body. Why?
It was before Botox.
Before Botox, yeah. They were all on Botox. They said, I can't go to a protest without having my Botox because I might be seen on camera. Yeah, no. So essentially what's happening is the sound wave is coming in, and you know what? Bone, tendon, and teeth are all piezoelectric. So what do we know from those 1950s, early 1960s, published in New Scientist in 1963 tests? That if you hit sound into something, it will produce an electromagnetic wave. And also, if it comes out, it will come out this way, but also the whole thing will shake and it'll go into your brain, and the thing will reverberate in your brain, around in your brain. You get a direct kind of phase conjugation, that is the frequency, if it impinges on your bone here or your teeth or your shin, it'll some of the sound will be reflected directly out. And depending on the phase, it can end up by creating the sort of energy clusters that we produce in our reactors. And these things can tear flesh apart, and they can produce these coherent matter wave streams, these solitons that come out, which will mash up your body, right? And they will be like little needles in your body. So you will get bruising, whatever, you'll get blood coming out of your nose. And if it's intense enough, the sound will be in your brain, and it'll turn parts of your brain into mush. I mean, literally turn it into mush, in my estimation. And so if it can literally cause holes to form in metal, in like even strong metals, then why would it not, in the fluid medium that is our brain, why would it not cause deep damage to there? So you might be knocked unconscious, you might see blood appearing, you might not be able to be, because it might affect your motor areas, you might literally fall over. And all it is a matter of finding the right intensity, frequency, phase conjugation, and delivery. And so I believe that what you would do is you'd, under that Chinook, or you'd send forward reconnaissance, you would send drones forward that have these things mounted on them, right? Or you would just mount them on the underside of your Chinook. And as your Chinook's coming down, it's basically in disabling all of the people that are going to shoot. And so you can land, and you could have handheld ones. I mean, the devices that they were using in Australia were only kind of like this big. They had them on a tripod, but you could reasonably expect a decent lithium-ion backpack and someone to hold them. They'd just point them at someone. They It's terrible. It's terrible. But in theory, if it's not exposed for too long, you're paralyzed, you recover, and you're not dead. You haven't killed them. It's kind of like, but you could probably.
But there's long-term effects, right?
It depends how much brain, if you're a boxer, you end up with brain mush, and sooner or later you have symptoms of Alzheimer's and these kind of things, because too much of your brain has gone to mush. But I think really, for a short exposure, yes, it'll cause these things to bruise and these things to puff up and so on. And there might be some cognitive disabilities, but the brain, I think I spoke about this before when I was here last time. I had a friend who, and sadly she died a few months back, a great friend. She had a brain tumor about the size of my fist in her head. And she had that removed. They thought she wouldn't walk, she wouldn't talk, whatever. I ended up performing on stage with her in slapstick comedy, right? So, this is something that a brain can recover from. You actually need surprisingly little brain matter to function, which explains a lot of things, to be honest. I think for these people, it would have been a terrible, what the hell is happening to me? I'm paralyzed, I'm bleeding out of my nose, I can't perform my role in this.
This technology different than cavitation?
No, it produces cavitation.
Okay. So
here's the thing. When you're doing, and this is why it was important to introduce those first few concepts with Suhas Ralkal's life history. When you're doing, ultrasound to look for a baby, or you're looking for maybe polyps on your ovaries, not to say you've got any, but anyway, on a woman's ovaries or something like that, or you're using a shockwave system to destroy a kidney stone, let's say, these things are going into a part of the body where you don't have bones or tendons. You've got the spine at the back, but you're focusing that energy in an area where there are no piezoelectric materials to cause phase conjugation or to enhance the process. But when you're firing a beam and it's hitting the forehead, these parts of the teeth here, the shin, those things are going to be manifesting this effect. And so essentially what you're doing is you're creating the power of more than the energy you're delivering. Because when you get a coherent effect, which will occur at the point of the material, if it's piezoelectric, as it's reflected, you'll get a coherent effect occurring on the surface. That will produce ultimately it will produce these little mini black holes that will start sucking in water from your body and manifesting different elements that will be spat out with high kinetic energy. It's sick. It's sick. But I guess they say, do we shoot them? Do we bomb them? Like, if you're going to go into a place and you need to extract someone, you basically need to disable everyone, but you don't need to kill them necessarily. And so, when you have an adversary that doesn't know what's happened to them, but they know it made them incapable of fighting, and they don't want the feeling of confusion that they suffered for 5 months afterwards, and so on. They don't want to go in that theatre again. That's it. Hands down. It was fair when we could shoot bullets at each other and there was a chance of missing. But, now you can just do a standoff, basically disable, stun us all, and we don't feel so good for 6 months. And I don't want more of that. Thank you very much.
So when was this used? When did we use this technology then? Australia?
I think the cut-down versions are the active denial systems. The more advanced versions, which are able to push it to the limit. But like even what was used in Australia, I called it barbaric at the time. It's absolutely barbaric that these things should be used. These people are trying to exercise their so-called democratic rights in a democratic country to voice their concern. And, they're not throwing Molotov cocktails. They're just a lot of people. And what you're doing is you're saying, I'm the boss and I've got this thing you haven't got, and you're going to feel bad. And you're not going to know what hit you.
Do we have video of this, Ryan? This incident in Australia, or it exists? I guess
it certainly existed.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not making it up.
Maybe Ryan can find it. I'd like to see it.
There's a whole crowd of people, and then they're up on the public building, and they've got these little panels up on tripods, and then the people are all complaining of these swollen lips and blood and bruising on their. But they have no explanation for it. If it's microwaves, it should be cooking inside. This isn't microwaves. Now, it could be microwaves, because if you've got microwave sound, i.e. frequencies of energy that are... Normally, that would dissipate very quickly. But if it's transmitted via sound and phased array sound so that it produces a tight beam, when that hits you into piezo material, it will produce microwaves there. Nowhere else, it'll produce it there. And it's not transmitting microwaves, it's transmitting sound at microwave energies. But it could even be subsonic. Subsonic will do the same, but it's just the number of resonant nodes that you will create in anything that you're interacting with will be much less. And when you're doing resonance, it doesn't matter the individual energy that you're putting into a particular resonant standing wave. It's the accumulation over a period of time.
Is this also the technology then that you think that was used in Venezuela?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's a more advanced version of the publicly available systems for governments to buy to.
And is this the Havana syndrome stuff?
Havana syndrome may or may not be caused by sound as well. It's standing wave sound.
Have you seen some of the new, like 60 Minutes just did a whole section, another update on this Havana syndrome stuff, and they interviewed a bunch of the people that had gotten hit with these weapons, and it's like they were clearly targeted. And it was like it seemed like they were targeted probably by the Soviet Union, and then that Soviet technology got sold to America a few years back.
Right.
And so is that
I've not seen it, but there's one telling thing from what I have read about it in the past. And that is when they were in that embassy in Havana, there were areas where they would be exposed to it and there are areas where they weren't. And do you know what that tells me? It's standing waves. So if I get a speaker in here and another speaker, and I put some, let's say, it's easier to hear with low frequency sound. You pulse anyone can do this at home, and this is relatively safe, right? So you can try this at home, kids.
Don't try it at home, guys.
No, you can try this one at home. So what you do is you get, for your phone, you'll get a signal generator. There's many free applications you can buy out there, and you can plug that into your amplifier for those people that, you could even plug it in, as long as your Wi-Fi speaker has two, your Bluetooth speaker, you have two of them, and one will produce a left and one will produce a right speaker. And then you can put this low frequency in there and crank it up to 11 and then walk around the volume of your internal space. And what you will hear are areas where you do not hear any sound. And there will be other areas where you hear intense sound, which is absurdly intense. And what you're looking at there is a crest and a trough interfering to produce no sound. Or a crest and a crest, or a cross and a cross to produce very intense sound. And so that is the principle.
So I wasn't able to find video of the Australian protests and the active denial system, but this is one that became really popular after the Maduro raid.
Oh, right, yeah, this is this guy,
Peter Doocy,
news
and
reporter, isn't it?
getting hit with the active denial system.
A man-sized beam of millimeter waves that can be fired from up to 1,000 meters away that are designed to get the subject, whoever's standing on this X, really, really hot so that they move. And it's about 50 degrees out here right now, but I just felt like it was about 1,000. And I've never been inside a tub that somebody dropped a hairdryer in, but I would imagine that that's what it feels like.
After about 1.5
Yeah, now he says
seconds,
millimeter waves, but he
1/64
doesn't
of an
say that
inch
the
of my
millimeter
skin
waves are
was
electromagnetic.
130 degrees, but as soon as I stepped away...
Now, if you have millimeter sound waves, then that could be what that is. But it doesn't really matter, whether it's electromagnetic or whatever. If he was to stand and be exposed to it for a period of time and he ended up with these bruising, then you could argue it's the same thing. So you do need to find those sequences, and they will be available somewhere. But essentially, sound with piezoelectric will convert into electromagnetics, and electromagnetics will convert into sound. So either way, it's like two sides of the same coin. It's interconvertible when you have a piezoelectric material. And so... and he's saying millimeter. Millimeter is like near micro. It's in the kind of radio frequencies that are like able to warm things. And the sensation is warming because it's local. But is it because he didn't say millimeter sound waves. He didn't say millimeter electromagnetic waves. But like I say, they're interchangeable. Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, there's a weapon component, there's an energy component of this thing, and you're going after the energy component of it, obviously.
I realized in 2017, many manifestations of this technology have already been weaponized. And for me, I'm not really interested in subjugating people. I'm not really interested in killing people. I'm interested in what this technology can bring beneficially to humanity. And in a world that doesn't have all the elements it needs, then synthesis of elements would be very, very useful. There are all kinds of resource wars because...
What do you mean? We need heavier elements? Or,
yeah, so I'm going to show you...
for energy.
No. You actually need technical elements. So, for instance, coltan is very important in the touch screens and batteries. And there are all kinds of elements which there isn't much on Earth naturally. And you have to go to unpleasant places and who do not ethical mining practices to acquire these elements, and they denude the local environment and poison the local populace in the process of extraction just so that we can put our finger on a touchscreen and look at 10-second animations.
Unlimited supply of all elements through creation.
So the way I look at this is when you have these topological monopoles, you feed it with whatever, and it becomes prima materia. That is no element. The technical term is quark gluon plasma, but whatever, right? This is the most superfluid thing known to man by mainstream scientists, and if it produces a magnetohydrodynamic structure, it will produce 10 to the 9 to 10 to... In fact, it produces up to 10 to the 19 field. So when they magnetic field, when they collide at CERN, two protons together, the products of that produces a kind of self-organizing magnetohydrodynamic structure out of the quark gluon plasma, which produces magnetic fields of around about 10 to the 19 Tesla. And to make matter fall apart, if you can create a field, magnetic field that is over 10 to the 15, but even down to as low as 10 to the 11, which is still phenomenal numbers, just these absurd numbers, right? You can cause normal nucleons, that is neutrons and protons, to fall apart into this prima materia. Specifically, if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, it blew up, and the first things that to form were these mesons, these quark-antiquark structures, and that is literally prima materia, and that is what is produced, in my view, in these structures. Okay, so when you've got that, there's this guy called Stanislav Adamenko, and he learned the Soviet method, or I think I talked about this last time, but just to go over it again, the Soviet method of nuclear transmutation from the 1950s. And by late 1990s, he had got some agreement to use the old Soviet isotopic factory outside of Kiev in Ukraine. And he'd got funding from Privatbank, Kolomoisky et al., whatever, these two characters that were indicted later by America. But anyway, they got funding and they did this incredible study. And essentially what they did is they had 300 joules. It's a lot of power, but it's not a lot of power in the scheme of things, in a capacitor bank through a special way of delivering it in a very fast pulse through what's called a dielectric barrier discharge. They were able to pulse into metal targets. And what they found was, with 20,000 consecutive experiments, they found that whatever metal you used, you created every element in the periodic table. every element. So 20,000 sequential experiments produced every element in the periodic table with whatever you started with. And in his 2003 patent, he shows in a pure copper accretion disk, that's where the product of these explosions went, there was a half-broken iron-rich crenellated sphere where it had inside a perfect hemisphere. And he said in a 2005 Ukrainian Kiev newspaper that the nuclear reactions occurred in this hollow space due to dark matter. That technology, under US government funding, the whole lab, which is 2 or 3 times the size of this room, the actual equipment, was moved from Kiev in 2015 to, I think, in Illinois. And George H. Miley, who's still alive with us today, who's been absolutely obsessed with this transmutation process. And I've got videos of him talking to Martin Fleischmann, asking him to comment on transmutation in 1997 in Vancouver. He verified this technology, and they're under a company called Proton Scientific. It was originally called Proton 21 Labs in Ukraine. And then published papers all the way up to 2021 with his name on it. This is like one of the most senior nuclear researchers in the American sphere. And then it became part of the classified energetics research. But essentially what we see is this signature thing, which is the iron-rich crenellated sphere. And of all of the SMC took from 20,000 sequential experiments, he chose that as the thing that is the signature of this process. And what I have found from all kinds of experiments, plasma, ultrasound in water, electrical discharges, all of these processes, is it produces this iron-rich crenellated microsphere. And if you see that, then it is doing the process.
Iron-rich crenellated microsphere.
Do you want to see what they look like?
Sure.
Right. Can you bring up the radiation transmutation? So this is another late 1990s, early 2000 slide from Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto. He's saying we've thought about this whole process wrong, a bit like the Ptolemaic theory thought, the sun revolved around the Earth, and they finally realized it was the Earth revolving around the sun. We need to think of it different, this process. It isn't 2 deuterons being smashed together. It's some kind of like vortex thing is pulling them together, and they come together because they want to, okay? And so you have a mini-bang down in the bottom right. It's very insightful. So if you click to the next slide, and we'll just go through these quickly. These are a range of people from 1980s, Yul Brown, 1990s, 2000, David Yerth, Kladoff, 1980s to 2003, and the Russian hydrowave technology in 2006, 2009 have all shown radiation remediation. So if you go down, so Yul Brown did it with cavitation, HHO, this is oxyhydrogen gas, and he remediated cobalt-60 in a short period of time, 50% reduction. And that is a typical radioactive isotope that comes out of a nuclear reactor when a neutron interacts with iron. So carry on. David Yerth, he explored this technology of Ken Shoulders. Ken Shoulders invented the screening technology, so we have microelectronics. He also invented the quadrupolar spectrometer. He's not a nobody. And they tried these electron clusters and fired them towards a radioactive isotope, in this case cesium-137. And he found that every impact would reduce the half-life by 50%. Go to the next slide. He was held back by both the Bush and Obama administrations. They did 11 years research on this, and they could basically remediate waste using this technology. Next slide. This is Kladoff I was talking about earlier. He found that he could produce thermal energy 2 to 7 times above the electrical energy input. There's a potential reaction down there. Next slide.
Is this the presentation you're doing in Italy, or is this different?
It is part of it, yeah. So this next thing here, what he's showing here is between 1997 and 2002, the purpose of this work is to determine the real possibility of cavitation destruction of matter on the example of transmutation of various chemical elements, showing at least 3 main modes of destruction. Changing the structure of the nuclide by adding 1 or more structural elements, changing the structure of the nuclide by dividing it into several fragments, that's splitting it up, and changing the structure of the nuclide by dividing it into the smallest structural fragments, or complete transformation of the matter into radiation. That is converting it into photons. Literally making some ordinary solid matter completely disappear. So if you go on, He made these devices and it remediated nuclear waste, cesium-137. Next slide. In this one, he synthesized with three. You see, the longer the cavitation works, the more new elements appeared. 19 new elements after 2 hours. 360 hours gives you 55 new elements from whatever you start with. Next slide. The Russians verified this. Next slide. Using these two systems in 2006, 2009, after Kladov died, they verified you could remediate nuclear waste using cavitation. This is a semi-classified report. Now, what you're seeing in here with this wizard in frame, this is my colleague Alan Goldwater down in his Magic Sound Labs. It's
That's
just
the
hilariously
wizard,
named.
That's the wizard is your.
Though the
is your
wizard's
call?
very important, but no,
Okay.
they consider him a wizard. Like he looks a bit like a wizard, my friend. Actually, he when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were making the first Apples in their garage, he wrote the AIFF audio format, which is still used today, and so he has a long history down there in the Bay Area. But anyway, this is a device that is a replication by a child prodigy called Griffin Brock. And it's a replication of the shadowgraph technology of Nikola Tesla from the late 1880s, 1890s. This was producing X-ray-like things, which he called shadowgraphs, but we're not using, in his view, X-rays, prior to Rontgen inventing X-rays. Okay, but he didn't kind of announce it before Rontgen came out with X-rays. So anyway, the tube that you see there, that little kind of glass bulb, is being driven by a 1920s manufactured diathermy unit over on the right. And if you go to the next slide.
Looks like the cylinder on Mars a little bit,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. Yes. Maybe that's a big version of this technology.
It could be. It could be.
So when he was showing this dark light, he was able to replicate, and we've just done it on Friday this week. We replicated this process of seeing real-time X-rays. With my hand, you can see X-ray, real-time X-rays. This was Tesla's dark light, and this would produce this, I believe, the same kind of radiation that was observed by Ivan Filimonenko. And so I speculated that we could take this tube and expose standard radioactive isotopes through it, and it would actually cause remediation. Okay? If we look there on that piece of wood that's mounted opposite the beam that's coming out of this device, you've got a bunch of standard radioisotopes. If you go 2 slides down now, there, polonium-210, cobalt-60, strontium-90, cesium-137, thallium-204. These are all short-lived or up to 30-year, roughly, isotopes or that are typically beta isotope. They produce an electron when they decay. Next slide. And so we look at them in a spectrometer. Carry on, about 3 slides down. And next one. We're measuring the activity using this device where the radioactive particle, the electron comes out, it goes into a charged chamber and it produces like a load of electrons coming out, and you see that as a pulse. And so what we do is we count the number of pulses in a minute per minute over a 5-minute period or whatever. So you see 12,882.5 per centimeter squared per a unit of time. And then the background is just 20. So you can see the background is very, very small compared to what's coming out of this standard radionuclide sample. Go down about 5 slides. So I'm doing all the samples there. Next slide. So after we expose this to a total of 12 minutes of radiation, click through the next 4. That's it. Each of these isotopes are reduced in their activity. So polonium-210 from 12,800 to 9,000. Cobalt-60 from 7,500 to 7,378. Strontium-90, 17,000 to 14,000. Cesium, 8,900 to 8,600. And thallium-204 from 26,000 to 19,000. Okay? Look at the acceleration in the decay rate that you've got there. For strontium-90, which the Russian group did to verify Kladov, 330 times faster, 330,000 times faster than natural decay rate. Cesium-137, which is what was decayed by Kladov, 53,434. Cobalt-60, which was decayed by what's his name? The HHO guy I spoke about earlier, 7,700. So these are all elements that have been proven already to be remediated by cavitation processes or HHO plasma processes, here with a non-contact beam ray. And what this means is we can use this technology to clean up the land around Fukushima and Chernobyl. This means we can remove the beta isotopes in the reactor as they're synthesized in a thorium reactor. This makes these things intrinsically safe and zero waste. it's spectacular transformation in our potential for producing energy from nuclear in a safe way.
It's just transforming it into electrons?
So typically when like cesium-137, the neutron decays in there and produces a proton, an electron, and an anti-neutrino. That goes then, because it's now a proton rather than a neutron, it goes to barium-138 or something like that. Well, not in that case, but it goes to barium-136 or something like that. I don't know.
I see.
It goes to a stable isotope. I might have got that wrong, but it goes to a stable isotope that is non-toxic then, in terms of radiation. You wouldn't want to eat the cesium, but it's non-toxic. Typically.
Some days I might.
It's quite a reactive element. It's normally a liquid, and you don't want to touch it. So if we go on, because this is... You can't normally get radioactive samples from because if you're not a particular nuclear lab. So I thought, what experiment can I do? And you can't even buy these samples in Europe. That's why I had to do it here. It's easy, relatively easy to buy these Czech samples from authorities here.
You can buy a plane ticket to Chernobyl or something, right?
Yeah.
Stay away from that.
I wanted to do something that has a profound implication on science generally, and that I could do, and no one could stop me doing. So I believe that this same process was going on in this reactor we call the supernova, because with the nova reactor, they were the first time I saw these iron-rich crenellated spheres, right? And this was long before I realized Adamenko had it as his signature thing that shows the process occurred. Okay, so Ryan, if you bring it up, we're going to talk about the money shot here. The one of two real money shots here. So in the same, not that one. Go back to the previous presentation.
Need to get you to have a conversation about this with some modern public scientists. The guy that just went on Jesse Michaels' show and talked to Eric Davis. I forget what his name is, but
Weinstein.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I saw
yeah.
that. You know what? I wasn't that impressed.
No.
For both of them.
Yeah.
But for different reasons.
Right.
Because, you don't know whether Eric W. Davis has a limit to what he can say. That's one thing. He might know more, but he might be hamstrung, hand-tied, where he can only say things that make him look like he doesn't know a lot. But that doesn't mean he does know a lot. So like you're left in this quandary as does he or doesn't he, right? Then that then makes... Mr. Weinstein, he then has a problem with how to judge the information and how authentic it is. And then the corollary is that Eric is talking about all kinds of things which no one can understand. I mean, I love listening to him. He sounds very intelligent, but I have no idea what he's talking about. In the same way, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about a lot of the time.
Sometimes, yeah.
But I'm trying to derive it from physical experiments that people can do, and they can use standard purchasable services to verify the products. Right. So I'm not trying to do something that you need a national lab and $1 billion budget to do. I'm trying to whittle this down to core essence demonstration of the principle, so that anyone can prove to themselves if they so choose to. Okay.
And before we get to that, what would Weinstein say about what you're saying? What would, if he was sitting in here and listening to the first hour of this podcast, what is he saying? Is he like
Actually, I think because the way he approached Terrence Howard had one thing, according to Weinstein, that was novel and interesting, right? That said, I think this data speaks for itself. And I think all he would need to do is to look at the data and the spread of the data, even if he wasn't prepared to do what a 5-year-old could do and run an experiment and use the modest amount of funds to be able to verify that what we produce is what happens, right? Even if he chooses to not look through the telescope, here's a telescope. This is moving around here. We're not moving around. It's a different way that things are working to what you're taught. Even if he's not willing to do those simple experiments that can be conducted by preschoolers to see the effect, he can see the spread of evidence published by many third parties. Like, for instance, the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute. They published water flow plasma discharges. This is 250-volt bias, 200-volt bias, 2,000-volt pulses through a water channel produced long-lived luminous plasmoids that existed for 2 days, moving around on a piece of metal after the apparatus is shut off. But in related research published in around the late 2010s, early 2020s, they showed that typically these structures produce, drum roll, iron-rich crenellated microspheres with a hole at one side, and material comes out of that. So if the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute...
Like a mushroom?
Yeah.
Am I getting that?
No, the mushroom is a great analogy for this.
Okay.
It's a great... You should always eat young mushrooms, by the way. They have a lot of chi, because they haven't fulfilled their ontological will to spread their spores yet. They're still wanting to. So young mushrooms are always better. Okay, so yeah, you are getting it. So what I looked at is what can I readily get that has a known radioactive isotope with a known half-life that I can see if we can remediate. And what came to mind, this was back in 2017, was carbon-14. Now, if you don't know, the way this works is, for those in your audience, hello, there's this cosmic rays that come in. These are sometimes giga-electron volt protons. They're supposedly from actual cosmic events, right? They come into the upper atmosphere and they collide with other particles in the upper atmosphere, and they produce neutrons. And the neutrons then go into nitrogen-14. Then they knock out the proton comes in or whatever. The proton comes in, knocks out a neutron, and makes a carbon-14 rather than nitrogen-14. So the proton moves it along the periodic table. So it's a PN reaction. So the proton comes in, knocks out the neutron from the nitrogen-14, which is the most abundant element isotope of nitrogen. Nitrogen is 78% plus of the atmospheric gas, and most of that is nitrogen-14. So the proton hits that, knocks out a neutron, and it moves it to carbon-14. Carbon-14 has a 5,730 plus or minus 30-year half-life. And that is the basis for radiocarbon dating. Now, if I want to say maybe I can remediate these nuclear radioactive isotopes which have half-lives of 30 years, that is to say they really want to fall apart. They're not happy being those isotopes. They want to fall apart in 30 years. Carbon-14 is quite happy to be carbon-14. Half of it will hang around for at least 5,730 years plus or minus 30 years. So if I can do carbon, I can definitely do these nasty isotopes that come out of fission reactors, whether they be uranium-235 or thorium-based. Okay, so this would be a watershed moment, and there's two aspects to this. Can we do the radiation remediation, and what would be the best way to determine that? And then, secondly, what is the thing that's causing that? Is it this same thing we see everywhere else? These iron-rich crenellated spheres, which are the core of a microball lightning. Okay, which is a phenomena that occurs in nature in any charged hydrodynamic system. In 2000s,
do scientists agree on that?
It's not even really important whether they agree. They can do the experiment and they can see.
Yeah.
Like experiment always trumps a hypothesis.
For sure. I was just trying to understand the total picture, but
George H. Miley, the most senior nuclear scientist that the American, the United States has, agrees.
Okay.
I don't need anyone else's opinion. He's already shown that Stanislav Adamenko's technology, which produced 20,000 consecutive experiments from any metal turning to all of the elements in the periodic table, including, by the way, elements that are not in our near universe. That is to say, elements that are up to 4,000 AMU, according to his colleague Vysotsky, Vladimir Vysotsky, who I know well. Right, you can see a video where I'm presenting Matsumoto's work at the conference in Marioka last year, and Vysotsky walks in the room, and I challenge him to talk about Stanislav's work, and he says, "Yeah, we saw mass units of structures that were 4,000 AMU, which is absurd." They always talk about the 455 AMU that broke up into a load of alpha particles, and they also talk about the thing that acted a bit like a black hole. Where you fired atoms into it and they disappeared, but there was a glow of light and then it dissipated. Okay, so they saw these things, but yeah, it's real, and sooner or later other people will catch up. Yeah. So essentially, I proposed this in 2017. I ground the charcoal and prepared it in 2019, but I was told that the person that built the reactor had got breast cancer and died at the age of 40, leaving behind his 2 kids and his wife.
Right?
A man, yes. And it's terribly sad. But where he's operating, he would have these reactors up on a bench, and he would be, exposing his chest area to the emissions from them. So since I'd learned by then there's this type of strange radiation that could come out and that it could remediate isotopes. If you in your body you have two isotopes and nuclear reactions recurring in your body all the time, and they are carbon-14 and potassium-40. And potassium-40 decays with high energy beta particle, but also lesser reaction pathway is a photon that comes out. And obviously, if you've got sugar molecules making your DNA, and 1 in every trillion of those is carbon-14, if that's converted to nitrogen-14, well, it's not carbon-14 anymore, is it? It's gas. So it's not going to hold your DNA together. Now, your body has mechanisms to stitch together and repair DNA, but like if too much happens in one go, then it can't find the bits to put back together. You know what I mean? So you wouldn't want to be exposed to this. And so a lot of the interim time between 2019 was to understand the risks, the exposure levels and things that I was prepared to take to run an experiment. Okay, before I could explore it. So, anyway, in this particular reactor, it has electromagnetic in the form of a standard microwave that you have in your kitchen, potentially, and in there you have standing ion acoustic waves. That's sound waves moving in a plasma, producing resonant nodes. So this is all of the things you need to produce these energy concentrations. Okay, so there's also water present in there, and that is a source of hydrogen, which is key to this process. So if you go to the next slide, I won't play the videos, but this is the reactor. There's a whole bunch of people watching me assemble it. And then they went down to a different level. You can actually run this if you want, and then you can include it. Not that one, but the other one. You can actually see, this one, if you play that video. So we're just about to run the experiment for the carbon-14 remediation. And down there in our control group. Okay. So first off, I wanted to keep them at a minimum safe distance. We're going to heat the magnetron. This will be for about 10 seconds. So I'll give you, that will be our 10-second countdown. And we are turning on now. 2, 3, 4, weirdest countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh yeah, we got a breakout on the top. It's breaking out on the top.
No, that's just looking through into the plasma. You can have a look if you like. So we've got 5 observation ports on the side here. Because the microwave is a certain size, it can't come through those holes. So we're looking through them now, and you can see the ball plasma in there. And the streamers going on. Have a look, there's a ball. Yeah, I'm only about 20 degrees hotter in my brain right now. So I'm going to look inside the reactor here with the camera here. So you can see the plasma doing its thing in there in a minute. Can you see the ball of lightning in there? And there are much better videos where you see the streamers in Dr. George Eagly's work. And this was built by Eagly's team in Hungary. It's pretty stable. I'm very happy with this. How many minutes have we been running? That's Paul Harris, my friend and colleague from Canada. It going. Hopefully got enough material at the end. He develops a technology called the Therifier. You should have him on. He's fantastic, fascinating. Oh, it's beautiful, guys. So you can see all the little tendrils in there, briefly in there. We've just lost confinement. And shortly this will be over. And it was less than 2 minutes, the entire runtime of this.
So you captured ball lightning. You created and captured ball lightning. It's
capturing standing waves in a plasma, which leads to the production of ball lightning. The signature for the knowing that you have produced ball lightning is iron-rich crenellated spheres. Now, in 2017, about 2 hours drive from Budapest, I actually ran an experiment in the garden of the guy that made this device and the one that we were testing there. And I looked at those samples under SEM, but because they were from the inside of the reactor, they were these iron-rich crenellated spheres which were damaged by all of the dynamics going in. So I came up with this hypothesis, because on the inside of this device, there were all these pock marks on the inside of the aluminium. And I thought, how the hell are they getting there? And now I know these things can be neutral. They can go into a neutral state, and the matter in there isn't ordinary matter. It can propagate through the glass, possibly taking some of the silicon with it. And I observed splatters of that in the inside on some of these pock marks. But if it's going to be producing these structures, then I wanted some witness material. So if you go to the next slide, This is the fused quartz. This melts at 1,700 degrees. This is the reactor there. So if you go, that one there, you can see it. Don't press play. But on this particular presentation, you can see the tube coming out, but you see that brass and that aluminium rod. I chose those two because aluminium is paramagnetic, brass has got copper in it, which is diamagnetic. So these structures may be magnetic, and they may bind or be repelled from those two materials. And also, because I'm looking for iron has a high contrast ratio under a scanning electron microscope to aluminium, and a different contrast ratio with the lighter products that it spews out under the brass. So that's why I chose those two. And I've put those into 2 of the 5 observation ports. If you go forward. Okay, so next slide. I sent this off to a beamline in Lithuania, right? 368 days after I ran that experiment you just saw, which ran for around about 2 minutes. They have this special mass spectrometer, which was invented by Kenneth Radford Shoulders, by the way. But it only looks at masses 12, 13, and 14. So it's highly, highly accurate. So you're not counting the beta decays from your material using a beta decay rate counter. You're looking for the actual number of atoms of 12, 13, and 14 mass. And so it's the best way to do it possible. And so I sent it off there. Now, it should only be, it's charcoal, German-made charcoal, should only be about 6, 7 years old, maximum. Certainly not 10, right? And so I should come back and basically it should say that it is today's charcoal, because you can't determine that level of difference. Okay, what did it show? The date, if you go to the next slide, it's dated 1,309 years ago, 1,309 years old. And because it only ran for 2 minutes, based on the normal decay rate of 5,730 plus or minus 30 years, I accelerated that decay rate by 348 million times.
That million times, yeah.
Now, if you have a coronal mass ejection and it causes the ice caps to flood, that will produce vast amounts of cavitation. The rain, the water falling down, the actual flooding over the land, everything that gets involved with that, and whatever the elements are on the ground will be pulled in, denatured into prima materia, and spat out as new carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. And that will mix with whatever didn't get sucked in. And so we'll have a massive, it will make everything look young that's exposed. Everything will be younger than it really is. The second thing is lightning. Lightning, in my view, would produce microball lightning. And that, according to Ken Shoulders, that is the thing that produces a discharge channel in every lightning stroke before the stroke occurs. It actually ionizes the air. The ball lightning then would have a core, which would be an iron-rich crenellated sphere. So I expected to see iron-rich crenellated spheres. But in this reactor, let's see what we saw on those witness materials. And this was on Friday last week. Carry on. So next one. So this is my hypothesis. You have your fused quartz we saw. The ball lightning is being formed in that little fuzzy yellow thing. And then it's going through 2A is extracting material from the inside. 2B is extracting the material from the outside, or not extracting from anything, and just something made in the core is able to go around and deposit on the inside aluminium. So next slide. This is the brass and aluminium type billet that I used. And next slide. This is me putting them polished in. Now you can see the pockmarks that I was talking about before. They're from previous experiments that George had done. And I assumed that, how did they get there? Well, maybe they were coming out of the inside of this thing, because it's in this enclosed chamber. So how's it getting there, right? So I thought, I'm in that area where these pockmarks are, I will put some fresh, untouched material and see what accumulates on it. Well, look what we found. This is an iron-rich crenellated microsphere. Next one. That's from a different way of looking at it. Next one. You can see the pole on that one on the left. You can see how everything comes out from the magnetic pole. The actual area where the material is ejected is on the back side. Next one.
What are you looking at this with? A
scanning electron microscope.
An SM?
Yeah. You can see the pole on this one. And on the reverse side of the North Pole, you see the material coming out. That deposit that's on the back side is coming out of the hole that's always at the back of these things. Right? Next slide. The material here.
So what is the zoom on this then? You're like...
go back to the previous slide. You can see. So that's 10 microns. So that is a 10 micron structure. So it's 10 thousandths of a millimeter. Yeah.
And so you're at like 15,000
It
magnification. Or
says
something?
15,500. Very good.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I don't know how you did that math in the head. You're a better man than I.
Yeah, it's a genetic dysfunction that my family has.
Well done. For you guys out there, that was impressive. Full respect. Next slide. So on the next slide, you see the little blue target that I've got there on the crenellation. It's showing by atomic concentration 35% iron and 51.5% oxygen. Right? That is a normal. That is a non-natural element combination, because the highest oxidation state is Fe2O3. This is FeO2, which was only been produced in 2017 in a diamond anvil under something like 76 gigapascals at 1,700 degrees C. Well, how is that occurring in here? The magnetic pressure is what's causing it. And obviously iron and oxygen are both, oxygen is paramagnetic, the most paramagnetic gas, and iron is obviously ferromagnetic, ferro being iron. So look there's almost no carbon, nitrogen, and aluminium in there. Aluminium is an intermediary product. Aluminium comes from the fusion of carbon and oxygen and the production of aluminium and hydrogen out of it. Aluminium is the third most abundant element in the Earth's crust, right? And so when you understand how this process works, you understand why the Earth's crust is the elements it is and the proportions they are. Next slide, I'm going to look at the back end of that. Look at the material coming out of it. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, sodium, magnesium, aluminium, silicon, chlorine, potassium, iron. That's basically most of the things, and along with hydrogen, that's basically biology. So the thing with aluminium, these things tend to arrange themselves so that the vortex where the material comes out, it's sitting down. Now, what this is saying is that anywhere you have cavitation, you will make the world younger. Anywhere you have cavitation. And now, a couple of weeks ago, I was looking for the last images from the 200 kilograms that I'd received from the Takaaki Matsumoto family. And in there, I found a series of documents written by a guy called David Moon. And he was suggesting that cold fusion could cause the remediation, effectively, not in his language, but the deactivation of carbon-14. And that this would explain from the flood how everything seems a lot younger than it is. He literally said, I've got the documents. His original written draft photocopied, and then a written up version. But after I published my suggestion, and so on, and like I say, I only found that he'd said these things, but I want to give him credit. He actually published in 2022 this book on the next slide. Carbon Dating, Cold Fusion, and a Curveball. And he's basically saying that this could mess up all... There's another method you can use uranium-235. There's other methods, but the carbon dating is now not able to be used, in my view. It's not reliable. Anywhere. Unless it wasn't exposed to flooding or lightning, or water crashing against a shore, or in a stream, or coming out of a thermal vent. Only where you've got something like Göbekli Tepe can you trust the date. Everything else should be older. So the pyramids could be older if they're using any form.
Because it was buried and it wouldn't have been. Yeah.
It's a watershed. Now, the other thing is, I met Robert Schoch, and he was talking about this corona mass ejection at Cosmic Summit last year. And I sat down with him afterwards. And I said, lightning produces these iron-rich crenellated spheres, because he was trying to square how you got all these iron-rich crenellated spheres for the cosmic impact theory, right? Well, if you have all this incredible electrical energy in the upper atmosphere, it produces all these lightning strikes. That produces your iron-rich crenellated sphere. And that was my hypothesis. So in the next data, which is the first time it's ever been shared, because again, it was only found on Friday, this guy called Chris, thank you, Chris, in Connecticut, been following my work for quite some time, knew my hypothesis that lightning would produce these things. And he happened to just, happenstance, see that in his local area, a lightning had struck a telegraph pole, gone down the lightning conductor, gone into the ground. So, Ryan, if you'd indulge me, and we'll work through these slides. So if you go up to is that the first slide? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so go down. So this is the pole you see on the left, and these are two scorch marks where the lightning came out. And the copper conductor, the lightning conductor, had fell down on the pavement and left this vitrified, glassy tendrils on the ground. So go to the next slide. So there we go. So the lightning had gone into the ground and to the left and right and left these structures. Keep going. So that's a close-up. You can see in the center there, where it's most charred above, there's kind of like a reddy, ashy area, and that is where the lightning went into ground. Okay? Here's a close-up. You can see this glassy-like structure. She said, what should I do? I said, I want that slug. The thing where the lightning went into the ground, because I don't believe anyone's looked at these things elementally. Because remember what I told you, Svyatomenko used a high-intensity dielectric barrier discharge going into any metal and produced all the elements in the periodic table. Okay? It's right there, but on macro scale, right? Nature doing it. Not an experiment, we're just seeing if nature did it. So go to the next slide. These are kind of the marks. So the electricity had gone along the ground, but the bunching of the electricity was so intense, it fluidized and turned to glass the concrete, which is, silicates and so on. And there you can see where the lightning conductor copper probably was. I don't know whether it completely disappeared, but the electricity is coming out and it's producing these structures on the ground. Okay. So I asked him to dig out. I've got various samples, but the most interesting comes from this part. This is the slug. This is the bit in the ground where all the materials fuse together. And I speculate that as you get closer to the actual point of the center there, you'll get heavier and heavier elements. Well, we looked at the pieces scraped off the pavement and we saw basically sand that had been turned to glass with some other things, which it needs a lot more detailed study. This is just hot off the press. It's the first look-see. There's a huge scientific paper to come out. This is going to be transformational. But you're seeing the first cut of the raw data. Next image. As we took fragments from the side of that slug, we see this. This is a kind of agglomerated soil, but in it, periodically, there are iron-rich crenellated spheres, and you can see that where my mouse pointer is, there's the biggest one in this particular piece, and it's got a bum hole, and it's ejecting a little bit of material. And you can see in each of them, they've either got a hole because they're hollow, or they have a little bit coming out from the backside. Now, a non-resonant process, which this is not able to build up the intensity that will build up more matter inside, so it spews out a lot. Not a lot of coherent matter will go in because this is one hit and it's done. But the fact that it is producing that, let's see on the next slide what it is. Look at that. I'm looking at that little walnut-shaped piece of iron, and it is 29.97 by atomic. Actually, that's weight concentration. I should show you the atomic. But anyway, you can see there's a lot more oxygen than there is iron. Okay? And iron is heavier. So this is a high oxidation ratio of iron. This is from lightning. Now, what Robert Schoch was saying was there was fantastic amounts of lightning. I gave him the thing that I expect lightning to produce iron-rich crenellated spheres. And here we have the proof. So this changes the cosmic impact theory, potentially. It supports I think it was Paul Laviolette or someone in the early 2000s that first suggested the coronal mass ejection. There's another guy that's saying the whole Himalayas and everything there more recently was produced by a large plasmoid hitting the Earth and spinning that part of the Earth and ejecting the material west around the planet. And that's actually part of the process. Regardless, either way, it would be producing these same structures. I don't care which one it is. And so you have a system where it will transmute, and these structures will transmute the elements into non-radioactive material. So you have two mechanisms, all of the cavitation, both from the initial flood, but also from the rain coming down and producing intense stream flows. Then you have the electrical discharges, and we've got proof on both ends of this spectrum that will do this. And we know that it remediates nuclear waste. We've got proof. We've got proof that anyone can do if they want to look through the microscope. That is where we are at. And this is transformational. It basically means we are living where there's clearly been cultures that are much older than we think they are. And they're probably the bits that weren't washed away. So where you see all these ancient civilizations, the hardest thing to build is the stuff that's at the bottom. Why? Because that's the bit that didn't get washed away. The bits above that are everyone trying to rebuild after the cataclysm. Now, how old is the stuff at the bottom? Well, we don't know because people are living on top of it, except for Göbekli Tepe. And Göbekli Tepe has these temples that are like 500 years apart, and they're monitoring the precession of the equinox or something. And like, if they undid the whole of the rest of the complex, would it be the age it is, 12,700 years old potentially, or would it be much, much older? Would it span before? Much, much further back than that event. But the earliest structures there we're seeing is at the point of the cataclysm. How old does that go back? Do we have to wait 500 years to find out how old the rest of the temples are? If we look under those stones in Malta, are they only 5,700 years old? Or if you dig under the stones that have never been moved, maybe there's material down there that would point to the same kind of age framework as Göbekli Tepe. You know, we're in a world where we cannot accept radiocarbon dating. But at the same time, the technology is so beautiful. It gives us unlimited energy by proxy through enabling safe use of fission reactors, whether that be uranium-235 or thorium cycle reactors. Safe use, removing the mental barriers that the population have to having it in their backyard. That's one. As a transition technology to this technology, which is able to give us all of the elements we need in the periodic table. And the way I look at it, it's like baking a cake. You have the same ingredients, which is just energy. Energy is packaged into various isotopes of various elements. You pull that in and it basically converts it into energy packets, which are nothing. They're no elements. And then by baking, so what Adamenko shows in his 760-page book called Controlled Nuclear Synthesis, published in 2006, you can go and buy it now. It's about $170 as a digital download, but you can go and buy it. When I realized that this is producing quark-gluon plasma, I thought, oh, yeah, that's what it is. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if Stanislav has already worked that out. And I searched it in there. Yeah, it's in there. Right. So, like, when you come from two ends of the spectrum, like I'm super low budget, he's like ultra high budget, and you meet in the middle, and it's already been verified by the highest levels of the US scientific community that this is real, then you've got to believe it. Okay. But what he says is what goes into these cores, which he shows in his patent in 2003, is an iron-rich crenellated sphere. The hollow core is a nucleon electron macrocluster. Basically, it's no elements at all because it's quark-gluon plasma. And periodically, new elements are synthesized and they get ejected. But he shows that as you pack nuclei density in there, or you can reframe that, as you pack more energy density into it, it goes through a threshold where firstly it moves from light elements all the way up to iron, and it stays. And he's got a diagram in his book. He says iron, over a whole range of different densities, it only produces iron. And then suddenly you go through a critical threshold. He's literally got the maths in his book. I don't even have to do it, right? And it says when you get a critical energy mass density in there, it then shoots up to every element you could possibly imagine. And so you want to catch it on that curve from iron. Now, in our initial tests on that, we saw the same kind of things that I've just shown you. I'm not sharing it today because I need to process the data, but it's in a video, and you can see the whole video, which will be published, of the live recording session, okay? We see arsenic. And there is only oxygen, iron predominantly, and a few other elements which we just showed. Now, if you take oxygen-17, this key element, this spin nuclei of oxygen, which gets synthesized in the Huang reactors, which was part of my predictive, which was then shown to be proven. And you combine that with iron-58, you get arsenic, which is a single isotope. Now, later on, we're moving a little bit further in, we see zirconium. If you take oxygen-17 and mix it with arsenic, you get an isotope of zirconium. You see how it's building up? And this is just one example. I don't want to say this really because we only saw a sign of it, but we saw uranium in there. We saw uranium from a lightning strike on normal soil with copper in play. This means we can make any element we want. We literally have the power, what I call gods with a little g, toolbox. But we have to accept that it comes with great responsibility, and we should use it, praus, the meek shall inherit the earth, but the meek meaning translated from the Greek praus. You have great power, but you use it wisely, effectively.
Is the government even going to let this?
It's already out.
I know, but it's out, but it's not really being acted upon yet, right? Or
Well, it's been acted upon in terms of George H. Miley took the stuff offline, the Proton Scientific Lab, and moved it to the national labs for the part of the fusion program. But what I'm saying is, a child can run a cavitation experiment with a $35 ultrasonic cleaner, Reynolds wrap, and water. They need to have the skills of pouring water, pressing a button, plugging a thing into the wall socket, and folding aluminium foil. It produces yin-yang structures. On one side, the yang disassembles the matter. It takes oxygen, it would appear, from the aluminium, leaving behind boron, sends it over to the other side. The oxygen is then fused into the aluminium to make calcium. And other elements. We saw silver there as well, right? But here's the thing. That is something that's so simple. It's absurdly easy to do. Now, if lightning is doing the process, and volcanoes are doing the process, and cavitation is doing the process, this is a fundamental hack of nature. And that, if you bake that cake long enough, you get all of the elements. We do not need to go to war for critical minerals if we can synthesize the elements.
So then how do we do it? What would be the next steps to make this happen globally?
When the principle is shown, which I believe the project, the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, with its donors over the years has shown categorically, we are already producing technology that produces excess heat. That can be used, thermal heat, all over the world. If you have a solar panel, it produces 1 kilowatt of electricity, but you need like 10 kilowatts of thermal process water, then you can do that with a clad-off reactor.
What I'm saying is, what do we do?
What do we do?
Yeah, what do we do? How do we?
We do.
Yeah,
That's what we do.
Who
We
and
do.
what and when?
Everyone that's capable. So what you have to do is you have to understand that this is possible. The Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project was we need to get people over their mental hurdle, which is the indoctrination that radioactive isotopes do not change their decay rate. One, like I had this guy at Aarhus University tell me that he worked at CERN and he calculated the radioactive isotopes decay rate to the 36th decimal place or something. That was his achievement.
Let's focus.
Right,
What do we do? What do we do?
What do we do?
Yeah.
We build technology.
Okay.
Heat generation, radiation remediation, and direct electrical generation and propulsion.
Okay. And who does it? The government has to do it, right? Or private entities or private companies, startups? Like, how does it?
It's happening already.
Okay.
People that have been following the work, they've formed various teams around the world. We have an open we have a thing at Evo Labs, which I'm helping support, and they're setting up a framework where people can support that. We have a blog, my blog at Remote View, where I publish all of my work. We have a historical site where you can donate, which is at oh god, it's so historical I can't remember it. it's quantumheat.org. But we have a go-to place where people can find out how to get the Matsumoto book so they can understand his understanding of the process. They can go and see my blog. They can see where there's the 501c3 called Quantum Heat in the US. So people that are in a position to donate in that way can do that there. And we've got one landing page where people will be able to find out where they need to go. And if Ryan could bring that up right now, that would be fantastic. Ryan?
And then what do you think, as he's doing that, what do you think realistically we 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or you tell me what the time is, but when are we going to start to see this technology being used in practice? Who's going to be using it? What is it going to be creating and where?
I would like to see stimulated low-energy nuclear reactions, coherent energy transformation processes by these beams of this strange radiation, both for energy generation and for remediation of nuclear waste. Because if I stimulate a beta isotope to decay, I'm getting all of that held pent-up energy released. So I can switch on the emission of the power. And if I'm releasing high-energy beta particles, then they can stimulate a cascade of beta particles from a biased electrode, which produces direct electricity. So you can use electricity to stimulate these particles that will then force the release of things that will produce a lot of electricity that's usable. Okay, so that's one use. Thermal energy, it's already being done by Binjuan Huang. I'm spearheading and trying to promote people to make operable the clad-off patents which have expired. So a lot of the best implementations of this technology are already in expired patents. And so there's a problem. People don't want to invest in an expired patent But if they can have the courage to invest in the people that are capable of making those patents operable, then they're already in the public domain. People can go to their contract manufacturer, and it might cost them $10,000 to make a 10 kilowatt generator, right? Or they can wait until it's mass manufactured and they buy it for $1,000 to buy a 10 kilowatt generator. Because some people will try, and they like to do it for themselves. But the knowledge and know-how will be in the teams that deliver the minimum viable product. So I'm trying to enable, the first aim of the project in 2012 was, one, see if there's anything there. Can we replicate it? We did within 2 months. The second aim of the project was to find out what's going on. Well, I think we've done that. And I think we've conclusively, now with this latest data, we basically showed the whole process and the opportunity space that's there, and which is massive. It's immense. It's too much for any large group of people to achieve in their lifetime. There's so many opportunities. So the last thing is, the aim of the project was to help see delivered all of the various ways this technology could be used, but in a positive way, not to make bombs, not to better ways to kill people, not better ways to subjugate people, to enable the most incredible, bright future. I mean, we are looking at the most amazing future. If this isn't the golden age, I don't know what is. It's the best time to be alive right now. Because if we can bake that cake, we can make any element we want. If this really has the ability to manipulate matter in the way that it seems to and hack the neutrinoverse, which it seems to, that gives us propulsion, like likes of which you can only possibly imagine. And the energy generation. So making everything we need, propulsion, energy, all of the above.
Love it, love it. Let's take a break. That's a phenomenal first part of this, and then there's a bunch of questions that I have for you, and I want to go a couple different directions, get your thoughts on a few different things, but need to get some food and take a break.
It's that time, isn't it?
For sure.
There's a little boy's room.
Yep. Awesome. Good start though, man. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. Cheers.
It.
What does it look like the next several years for you and for kind of the technology that we've been talking about, and kind of like the next steps of like, what do you want to maybe not accomplish, but how do you see things playing out over the next several years with this technology kind of becoming more mainstream, being more used, and
The most important thing to me is energy underpins economies. And if we can enable safe, non-solar derived, that is biological solar or wind, and wave, they're all effectively from the sun. Nuclear is the only source we have that comes effectively not by proxy from the sun. If we can enable that for mass baseload, clean, then we can stop the arguments about CO2, whether you believe them or not. It's not important. We get the energy we need to grow our economies and lift people out of poverty. So that is the first best goal. I think beyond that.
But when do you see
it's a matter of will, to be honest. There is this will right now. It's happening. There is a nuclear renaissance. I know some of the people that are spearheading that, but also there are many now that have kind of said, right, we need to do this. Whether fusion comes online is always 50 years away, but certainly I think if we put our mind to it, that it's going to come sooner. Certainly it's occurring in the processes we are working with it, but it's not fusion in the normal sense. It's as I showed earlier with Dr. Matsumoto's work, it's actually creating the kind of pressures that you see in neutron stars, if not more, all the way through to black holes. So we're using the electric force to enable things that are only able to be achieved by incredible gravity ordinarily. And so that is being done now. And I do know Benjamin Huang is looking to develop large, massive energy generators based on cavitation, and his sponsor, Mr. Lin, has built this incredible conference center. We're near to Taipei. I think they've spent about $400 million on it already, and they want it to be the first net zero 5-star hotel and conference center on planet Earth. And that is to say, they'll use some geothermal, they'll use some solar, but there is the idea that a good proportion of their thermal energy will come from this cavitation process in things that look like a load of stacked trucks put together in terms of the scale of it. So it's happening. There are other aspects of the technology for material processing that are kind of at the tornado end. It's the wind hex technology, which is now patent-free because the patent has expired. And that enables us to potentially enhance food yields. That is to say, if you go to, for instance, the UK, often we have a lot of rain, and I think Americans, particularly in Florida, like to joke about it's always raining in England, and that's good. It makes it a green and pleasant land. However, when it comes to harvesting crops, we don't tend to use a lot of Roundup to kill our crops off, and so we're waiting for them to dry out, and you need a certain dryness in the wheat or the whatever the cereal crop is in order to harvest it and make good flour for whatever it is, pasta or so forth. And sometimes you fail to get the dryness below a certain level and it just ends up rotting or being animal feed. And that is a huge loss when you put all those energy, the fertilizers, the pesticides, the whatever into there, all that fuel to do. Anyway, so if you have this wind hex, it does this incredible thing. It extracts the water from the material at the same time as grinding it into free-flowing powder. And so you could maybe harvest wheat when you have available harvesters to do it, when it's not as dry as it could be, and then you can actually process it into storage-ready material that can actually be used and that it's not a total loss. So if you are able to maximize your farming to consumer product available, that increases the food security around the world. So energy is one thing, but it doesn't matter how much energy if you're beholden to the weather. I'm not saying let's control the weather. I'm saying let's control the grain so that we can use it. And there are a lot of products, for instance, there are a lot of gluts when, for instance, the apple season is there. You see this in Europe, that apples are everywhere and they're basically free. If you can process it using this low-end version of this process to convert it into dry, free-flowing, instantly storable powder of apple, then that can become, reconstitutable for baby food, for instance. It's rich in calories and it's got nutrients and so forth in there. So there's all kinds of things that would be wasted that we can enhance the productivity. So that's on the food side. The electricity generation obviously would be the aim, and what beautiful way more would it be to take radioactive waste and to directly produce electricity by forcing the beta decay of those radioactive nuclides. So we're actually taking waste that would be harmful in the environment, we're making it stable and at the same time producing direct electricity from it.
Yeah. And so I guess I keep trying to get to when and the timeline and what's going to change and what needs to happen, what needs to happen and how it needs to happen to get to kind of next. And then it's like, if the technology is already there and it's simple and a 5-year-old can do it, then I get to the why. Why isn't some company that clearly there's a massive financial opportunity to create clean energy and to take over the entire energy sector and system with this technology. So if it's simple and it already exists and it's already on the way, but there's no clear kind of answer to how this unfolds and where it goes next, then I'm just kind of at a bit of a loss for. It's great to talk about on a podcast, and it's a super interesting topic, but I like to get shit done too, so.
Okay. So you do by doing. And the semiconductor was found a long time before we had decent applications for it and able to make computers. The time from an initial understanding of a technology to delivery of that technology is shrinking. That's particularly true of things like software solutions because it's just extended mass and you can always be 100% right. The thing about actual making hardware, it just isn't as simple as making software that does things that you want to do reliably every time. And a lot of the people that have resources in the world they fall into two camps. Organizations like governments that can extract enough money to go on a whim on enabling primary research. And people that are investing in technology, and the technology they're typically investing in is technology that's software-based. And that's a real challenge, because if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, everyone was investing in physical manifestations of technology rather than software. So we have a problem right now. The technology, I for instance, with the Kladoff work, I had to remaster from 3 different sources, the Russian sources and the European sources, a functional, understandable pattern, which had been in the record since 1992. So even if you knew about cavitation, you found out about Kladoff, it was only because I had relationships with certain Russian people that they could find the Russian patent, give it to me, and I could correlate the two and find out what the real information was. So we now have a situation where there are actually people investigating this. Those are people that are already convinced by the strength of the argument. And hopefully what we've done here in the early part of this podcast is we've shown that now we're getting very, very clear signals that it is all the same thing. And it's not magic. It is just applied science. And once you get people over that hurdle of is it possible, they then start believing that they can do it. So that these patterns that are now being ignored, which were demonstrations of the technology, but there wasn't a full explanation for how they work and what signatures to look for when they are working. We now know what they are and how to detect for them, so they can believe. So we're in this transition. It might happen. It's like slowly, 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 all at once. We might be on the verge of the all at once, and I think we are. I get people contacting me and say, look, I'm teamed up with this person and that person and the other, and we're going to be developing these these variations of the technology. And they're open about it. And so I think it's happening. And I think it's suddenly going to appear like it came out of the blue. But in my own personal journey, it was like, I wanted more children. Is there a way to solve the energy problem? I didn't realize it would do all these other things. 2017, I decided I'm not going to do what everyone's telling me to do, look at for alpha, beta, gamma, and so on, radiation emissions. I'm going to see what it's actually doing under the microscope at various levels, macro photography. Then I realized something very interesting was going on. That's actually, it's all in all the sacred symbols around us. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is already out there. It's already known by at least a version of humans that lived before us.
In which sacred symbol? The flower of life?
The flower of life, the paisley, the yin yang, the swastika salvestica, the Maltese cross, all of these symbols are just slices, projections of this underlying magnetohydrodynamic structure that leads to manipulating matter.
And do you think that it was that they were using this technology in the past?
I can only assume they knew exactly. Yeah, there were humans, and
in what
it's
ways?
Eternal technology.
In what ways do you think it was being used?
Well, I think it was used for synthesizing both deep energy storage, things that could harvest energy from the environment, and I think that was probably what was in the Ark of the Covenant.
So this is the Great Pyramid conversation that we had the last time.
So some people say, oh, it's monatomic gold that was built in that. No, I think from water you get hydrogen. The hydrogen goes up it gets split into these 3 things: the electron, the proton, and this energy cluster that the Russians are now calling not magnetotor electrical radiation. They're calling them energy solitons. They've actually quantified that there are 3 levels of energy solitons: 2 low and medium, that are ordinarily always in the environment. They're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, and it's essentially static electricity. And this is what Tesla was looking for in the desert and harnessing with his iron ball. This is also what Henry Murray was collecting with his plates and showing all those light bulbs lighting up. So it's the same thing. And lightning comes from static electricity. So in the lightning that you see in a volcano plume, it's all this same thing. When you do these disruptive discharges, you produce high energy solitons. High energy solitons decay and produce a lot of low and medium energy solitons, which we have evolved with. These are not harmful. They are what we learn to live with throughout of our evolution. So that occurs in the ascending passage and possibly the other passage that may or may not be there, which would probably be parallel to it, and it's the other side of the structure. And this produces these energy solitons, which are neutral, and they go through horizontally the structure in the same way that you see, exactly the same way as you see in these simple 3-year-old can do it ultrasonic experiments with aluminium foil and water. And when you are breaking the hydrogen and producing this energy soliton, it goes through and it captures spin nuclei, calcium-43 and oxygen-17 that's in the calcium carbonate that's in the pyramid, and it produces a white powder. And the white powder is the Hajar al-Falasifa, the philosopher's stone. And it is replete with these energy solitons trapped in that material, and it just builds up. And where the energy structure has its one of its event horizons is exactly and precisely where I photographed a spectacular image of the alpha on the so-called sarcophagus. And I think that's the exact point, as it does in our ultrasound experiments. That's where the new higher density material is formed. Except you're starting with something that isn't real ordinary matter. It's pre-materia. It's an etheric cluster. A relic neutrino cluster. They say that in one of these structures, this is Shishkin, Krols, and Dubovik is the guy that discovered at the Nuclear Institute in Dubna the toroidal moment in 1965. He says that these, they calculate that there are 10 to the 9 to 10 to the 11 electronic vortices in these things, but they are proto-electrons. When you hit these things with a 2 kilo electron volt pulse, they will break up into real electrons. And so and when they're in their state, they will actually harvest energy from the environment. So they are an energy accumulator. And so when I look at the passages in the Bible that say when the Philistines opened the ark and they got all these boils on their face, I would see that as the etheric matter clusters that they blow up and they produce these coherent matter waves that go in, and they would cause damage and cancers. And I think that they were either cancers or whatever, but they died. Like, I don't know what it was, I can't remember, 60,000 or something that had a look. But even the people that say that if the ark is actually in Ethiopia? Yeah. They say there's a person that looks after it and periodically they die, but in the interim time they go blind. And I think it's probably because they're close to the thing, and the way that the arc is made is with layers of conductor, insulator, and this is exactly what you need to prevent this radiation coming out. So, like, everything is consistent with this, and the Hajar philosopher is both a weapon and it's a tool. And where this ties into one of your other podcasts with the Land of Chem. These are little machines. Now, you can make them in various ways, and I've showed how in the presentations or slides that I showed you earlier how they can take matter in and transmute it into other elements. I've also described how it's been shown that if you get a lot of matter into these clusters, you can make any element you want. I also believe that you can have seed pattern elements, and this is where the monoatomics come in. So if you want to create a pattern that you are then guiding the raw pre-materia to become, you need a single atom, because the single atom is the resonant structure that is the pattern on which the prima materia will then kind of crystallize. So you have gold, you have silver, but they are like, you need to make the monoatomic gold and the monoatomic silver and so on. And that is the pattern that you put into the mix. You give it the machines, which are the Hajar al-Philosopher, and you mix it with base metals, and then you cook it. And it might be in a resonant system. So you might have another pyramid that is, or a sound structure that produces the right amount of frequencies of sound for the right amount of time. You bake it, you bring it out, and it's a proportion of that material will be the element that you're targeting. And that's where the alchemy comes in, where it's important to understand how long you have to cook the souffle for, if you know what I mean, with these various ingredients.
Some of the what's supposedly off-world material that's been found has been almost like it's been 3D printed at the atomic level, layer by layer, with different atoms sitting on different atoms, and it's. I know that at Roswell and a couple of other, maybe the Virginia crash, there were stories of people folding up the material and then it would just spring right back into place. And I think there's material that we just can't explain yet that is from near crash sites where you've just got these layers of specific atoms.
Yeah, so there's the thing called arts parts, so-called arts parts, which is magnesium and bismuth layers. So you have a thick layer of bismuth and then magnesium. Bismuth is interesting. Why? It is firstly, it has an incredible diamagnetism. It also can be spin aligned, so it actually produces a so-called anti-gravity effect. And there's a guy called Richard Eskridge who was working for NASA in propulsion in anti-gravity research, and he used bismuth and polarized it with neodymium magnets or something like that to produce a weight loss in a spinning device. So, and so there's a reason why you would do that. But however, I've shown you that you can produce heavier elements, and the technically bismuth is a radioactive element, but it's like an alpha emitter as far as I can remember, which means it isn't easy to remediate. That is to say, it's beta isotopes that are much easier to remediate. So in the field that I work in, you can even go and look at work from George Miley from 2006 and 2009, where he's talking about studying all this metadata from all these different low-energy nuclear reaction research labs. And he found that one of the most common elements after iron that was being synthesized in all these independent experiments was lead. And in fact, it's one of the most predominant elements synthesized in Stanislav Adamenko's research when he made every element in the periodic table from whatever element he was striking. And so lead, if you add one proton into lead, you get bismuth. And bismuth is technically unstable. It's an extremely long half-life, but it's an alpha isotope. So it's unlikely to be synthesized desynthesized from this process. It's likely to be synthesized at the extremis. Now, magnesium, I showed you that in these structures, the outputs from these structures produce magnesium. I showed you that today in data from just last Friday. And magnesium is effectively, carbon is extremely likely to be produced. What is magnesium? Magnesium is double carbon. So it's a fusion of two carbon atoms. And so I believe that the so-called arts parts is a sloughing. Like you can imagine it like barnacles on a ship, right? Periodically, you have agents to remove them and you get rid of it because it's a payload. Now, it doesn't matter for your propulsion device that uses some sort of thing that negates mass because it doesn't matter how heavy the object is. So if it's carrying a payload of this stuff, it doesn't really matter, okay? However, I think that what happens when it's fully spun up, the structure will produce bismuth. In its transition shutdown or its basic nominal hovering level, when it's not trying to propel itself, it will synthesize magnesium. And it'll do that from whatever. From whatever. It'll be air. Air is the fuel. You've got nitrogen, oxygen, bit of argon, some water vapor in there, hydrogen, oxygen in that. And so it's synthesizing that, and it's basically a deposit that comes out of the process that gives the, let's call it, anti-gravity. And it is, the majority will be at when it's heavily spun up, where it's producing a lot of heavy element, and that will be the bismuth. Because if you go beyond bismuth, you get to things that automatically decay. They're not stable, and they go back to two things, bismuth and lead. And so you end up with a lot of bismuth because it's difficult because it's an alpha particle. And then when it's partially spun up, magnesium is a fusion of carbon. So like the most of the action occurs when it's in operation, and then so you end up with a thin layer of magnesium or whatever it is, and then or vice versa, whichever way around it is. If it's constantly flying a lot of time, it will be a different thickness, and I expect that those layers are not necessarily at how should we put this, consistent exact thicknesses. I would suggest that, like a tree ring, some years you get better environment for growing. And I would expect that those samples would have variable thicknesses on one or more of the layers because it flew for longer. That's it. It just flew for longer. So it deposited more of the synthesized material from the environmental cohered material. And the other one you think, I think it's is it nitinol? It's a mixture between nickel and titanium, and it's a shape memory metal. And you can actually make an engine where you have a cold or hot water and it spins it round because it goes back. It has shape memory. It changes goes back to its original formed shape.
You've got an airplane above your head,
yes,
right there. Your thoughts on that? You've seen the video, Ashton.
Yes,
of course,
yes.
You've seen the video. What are your thoughts on that situation?
So, I obviously am on the public record as having an experience with orbs in the sky with my father back in 1979. So when I had a sponsor for the project, in the early part of the project for the MFMP, there was this guy up in Sweden, and he kept talking about UFOs, and I just wasn't into it, right? I was focused on solving energy problems, right? And he started talking about the Serious Disclosure projects, and I thought I need to respect this guy's wishes. He's done a lot for the project. Let me just go and have, what can it do to hurt to watch this Serious Disclosure project? And then I saw these people talking about these man-made so-called alien reproduction vehicle, and you then surrounding that these orbs, and I'm thinking, hold on a minute, that is what my father showed me, like something extremely similar to that. And so I met him in Prague within a number of days, where he was coming to speak to some of the people that he employs and contracts. And I told him this story. And so for me, these are technological produced things. And if you go to Piotr Kapitsa won the Nobel Prize for discovering superfluidity in the 1930s in helium, in liquid helium. And he's a very prolific scientist from Russia. And he had a paper that he published, I think, in 1954 on the subject of ball lightning or something like that, where he said interactive microwaves produced from the atmosphere bounce off the ground, and he effectively talks about phase conjugation, and then transverse to that, it produces the ball lightning structure. So that paper from 1954 gives you a way where it's not necessarily how the energy is delivered, it's how you create the phase conjugation, the standing wave in the atmosphere. And when I think about that, there were 4 orbs in a row that were exactly equidistant. And if I'm...
that you saw as a child?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they appeared, they went, zoom, zoom, zoom. And they moved instantaneously at high velocity to a stop. They moved instantaneously back, moved instantaneously back again, and then disappeared. They appeared, did this thing, and then went back. So, like, if I was looking at that, this has unfeasible acceleration. It's able to appear and disappear. But the point is, it's 4 regular points. And that's what you get with a standing wave. You get points. Now, if you had one which is setting the standing wave and one that's providing the interfering, that's interference of phase conjugated electromagnetics, you can actually set a zone in which these things will appear. And so I think that's what was happening. So and I believe it was controlled because, weirdly, my dad was always pointing out Shoreham Aerodrome. And if you go from our house, and you can go and look this up on Google Maps, where I grew up, where I was born, the house I was born into is 32 Offington Gardens, Worthing, West Sussex, UK. You can go and look at that on Google Maps right now. Okay, we were looking out of the sunroom at the back of that into the eastern sky. And it was directly east. And if you go directly east, you go over the Masonic Lodge that my grandfather built. And then you keep going and you get to the oldest purpose-built aerodrome on planet Earth. There was a...
First purpose-built?
Aerodrome, airport. There was an airstrip built for the Wright brothers a year earlier, but this was the first purpose-built place. It's called Shoreham Airport. And my dad was always going on about it. I thought, you don't even fly. What are you going on about the airport all the time? And then this thing happened. And these orbs, it only occurred to me after I was recounting it a number of years later that it was literally directly due east from our house where the airport, you could literally draw a map. It's absolutely perfectly in line. So I think they were projected from there. I think they were... I think maybe they came out of the accidental discovery of the Foo Fighters, where they used continuous wave microwaves for radar in Germany, and the dust particles combined with the field interference bouncing off the aircraft produced these phase conjugations near to the aircraft, so they look like they were tracking the aircraft. They look like they're locked to the aircraft because the aircraft are providing the reflection, like I was talking about with the sound waves in the active denial systems earlier, where it's bounced off the piezoelectric material of your bones and your teeth and your tendons. So it's the same kind of idea that's going on. So what happened was, I didn't know about Ashton, but there was this former colleague who was a founding director of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, a guy called Mathieu Vallat in France. And he just sent me those 2 videos and said, I think you know what these are. And I immediately put out a video because I didn't have a filter. I said, in my judgment, I don't care whether these are real video or faked. It shows a process which we've seen in the lab. That is to say, I have a video which I'd previously shared in Azizi at a presentation on coherent matter traveling waves. And we have a discharge in a Vega experiment. Vega stands for Various Experiments in Glowing Activity, but it's the name of a sun because there was this Sapphire project and it was meant to be about Sol. So this is another sun. So anyway, whatever. And what we're seeing is this discharge, and out of this discharge, a structure came out. It went negatively round the electric discharge as if it was counter to the field that it should do, hit the electrode, got charged, came up, and then went round the other way. And then as it came round, another structure came out and it started orbiting around it, around its common center of mass. And then another one came around, and there's 3 orbiting around their common center of mass. So what I am seeing on that video, which I had published prior to ever being aware of these videos, was something, and as I know, it's as above, so below. This will work on any scale. It's scale invariant. And when I know these structures can team up to cause matter to disappear and to package matter and then teleport it as if it doesn't have any mass or interaction with ordinary matter, when I saw that, I explained it to the best of my ability, and I stand by that immediate explanation. About a week or 2 later, I had a conversation with Ashton Forbes about it. And I don't care whether it was made by a graphics artist, and I've said this to Ashton, I've made planes. I've made things fly next to planes in my former business as an animator in 3D graphics. I could do that. There's no point in me doing it. Why would I do it? But if someone was either coming that up with their brain as a remote viewer, if I was asking myself how this might have occurred, and then I'm reaching out into the ether, I might pull the actual facts from the ether and then put that into an animation. Or I might have someone that knows how it occurred and asked someone to make this thing for them. Or it's just a video of what happened. So I don't care. But what is happening in that video, we've done in the lab. And so from my point of view, this is a possibility. Now, there's a question about the lithium in there. There's these lithium-ion batteries. And actually, I think back in 2010, I had an e-bike I bought in Europe, and I was on Emirates Airline, and I had this massive lithium battery. Oh, you can't put that in the baggage. So I took it on, and it was like a huge thing. Of course, they changed all the rules after that. But the thing is, as I talked about bismuth, it's got this high spin. Hydrogen is the core, which produces like the iron ferrite core in a solenoid to focus the magnetic field. A spin nuclei will focus so-called gravitational field, right? That's the basis of what Richard Estridge was doing. Lithium is a spin nuclei, predominantly. It's lithium-7. And in fact, in old lithium-ion batteries, you had hydrogen, lithium, phosphorus, fluorine. They're all spin nuclei. It might have been just like an iron core in a how should we put this, in a normal transformer or an electromagnet. It was focusing the gravitational vector, and I think maybe it was used for that reason. The lithium-ion batteries had all of the elements in there that are good, in my view, with what I understand, to focus the gravitational vector in the central fuselage direction. So I think it was part of the operation, if it was an operation. But what you see on those videos, I stand by the public video that I made of that, and that I made before I had a conversation with Ashton.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. I appreciate that. That probably clears it up for a lot of people. I want to kind of go speed round maybe and kind of hit a whole bunch of different topics on this second segment. So consciousness and the nature of consciousness and what is it? What is life? Are you a meat sack with a brain antenna, or is there some spiritual component of who you are or who we are, or what are your thoughts on consciousness?
So I did a video in my 2 Burno lectures, one called Consciousness. You can go and see it on my blog at remoteview.icu. However, in a nutshell, your brain, as proven without them really knowing it, in a June 15th, 2023 paper published by Sydney Technical University using functional magnetic resonance imaging on subjects that are in a conscious state doing cognitive tasks, they found because oxygenated blood is diamagnetic and deoxygenated blood is paramagnetic, they saw magnetic vortices and anti-vortices propagating across the brain when people are in a conscious state doing cognitive tasks. That means that that's the minimum required to produce a toroidal moment. That means the brain, when it's doing consciousness tasks, is producing toroidal moments. I believe toroidal moments, which are also in plasma entities, okay, so they can be conscious as well, They are able to read and write, and it's based on an expression of their, what I call the cryptographic key, which is their DNA, which is a coil of a coil of a coil of a coil. That defines how their ultimate brain makeup occurs and how it is syncing up to its switch on time and so forth. What that does is then it's able to read and write information into the real cloud, which is the superfluid condensate of relic neutrinos that's universal. And because it's one universal condensate, if you put information in there, it's available instantaneously at every point of the universe for all of time because it's superfluid. It never dissipates. So this is, if you have a cryptographic key, your DNA has never been minted before. The two gametes have come together from your male and female, and they've minted a new key. You're creating the first spirit, the first action of your new spirit, right? And that is like... through doing this science, I've realized the absolute importance. And for some people, it's unfortunate. You know, people have had to make a decision where, for financial reasons or however they feel about themselves and their responsibility, they've decided that they can't have the child that they have conceived. Okay, but the reality is there is a potential situation where, at the point of fertilization, a new spirit is born. It could also be a prior spirit, and it could have been from another planet in another eon, okay, which has read and write access to the same complex electromagnetic pattern that can be everywhere all at the same time. And so when you understand how this works, you understand that the spirit exists eternally. The information of your experience of existence exists eternally. You can be reincarnated, 100% certainly. It's not in my mind, there is no doubt that you can be reincarnated. It's also no doubt in my mind that you can be possessed. You can also be mad because you might have some other entity that's reading, writing in the same phase space, but also in sync with you, such that you're hearing their voices in your head. And it's literally real to you. And you can even recall their memories. And see, my daughter, who, you know, I had this relationship with my father where I could say what he was going to say next for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And it was so weird. He would be about to open his mouth, and I could say all of what he was going to say, right? And we had this deep connection. My daughter doesn't quite realize it, but we have a similar connection. She knows that I know what she's thinking, and she's clocking on to the fact that she knows what I'm thinking. So there's no hiding it from us too. And so I always wanted an explanation for how I had that ability with my dad. Like, there must be something that's able to link us. So we were able to get in sync. And I think people that hand over their public key to another person that they love, they start to be able to feel their person that they've agreed to have that communication with. And twins have this as well, and also family bloodlines and brothers and sisters and mothers and child. There's all of these connections which are easy and trivial to understand, but have always been seen as some sort of esoteric and nonsense. Now, my younger daughter, up till about the age of 5, she was drawing these images consistently of these 8-9 foot creatures. She was never drawn more than, and she said she was never more than about 9 years old. They consistently had 6 fingers, and they had attacked her home planet. And it was horrible to see these images with gore and blood and disaster consistently drawn. And it actually worried my wife and I for some time. And she would not refer to my wife as, and thank you for giving me 2 beautiful children, Kim. She would not refer to my wife as her mother. The person she was drawing next to her in this battle against these creatures was her real mother. And it was totally consistent, the same story, but horrible imagery. And it's not like she'd been seeing horror movies or whatever. These things were brilliant images of horror. And then I spoke to a colleague of mine, a friend, Andrew Johnson, and he said, this is like those people who have these previous lives, and I didn't even know what that was. Right? Apparently, there's this guy in America, and he was able to speak Japanese, and he was apparently part of a kamikaze squadron, and he knew all these people back in Japan. And I think there was a TLC sort of episode where it's a channel here in the US, and they took him over, and he met these people who had been naming, and he could share experiences with them. But he was obviously not dead, and he was reborn. But had these memories, and I think this is what happened with my daughter. She was remembering a prior existence of her cryptographic keys experience that she was able to retrieve until her ego took over, and her ego started to take over in her present timeline at about the age of 5, and now she denies it even happens. She doesn't recognize it, but my wife and I and Andrew, and other people that I've told, and I've said it on podcasts in the past. This is not a thing, and I'm not speaking about this lightly. So for me, not only have I believe got a mechanism by which insanity and reincarnation can occur, I've actually experienced the manifestation of reliving part of a prior life. And she's an amazing, insightful person, young lady, and she has this ability, and I can see the CIA dripping at the you're gonna get that one.
So when you say ego, the word ego can be it's interpreted different ways for different people, I think. But you're talking about her identification with
in the current present moment,
her
living in the present,
her identification between the ages of 0 and ages of 5 were her spiritual self.
Were her reconnecting with her past life, a past life.
So her spiritual self. Yeah. So she was identified as her spiritual self, and then as she became more identified with her meat sack, with this shell in this particular life, then she let go of that, and she became...
I don't think she's fully let go, because my wife says, "Oh, she doesn't think about things," and I say, "I'm thinking she is always being creative. She's always thinking about. She's like in her own plane." You know what I mean? And I think everyone thinks their children are special, right? So I won't be the first parent that thinks their children are special. And my son is also incredibly special, but she has this connection with me that I have with my father, and I can recognize it, and she's starting to recognize it. And so, you can be born again, 100%. Now, the thing is, if you've made certain decisions...
And why does science say that that's not the case?
Because they don't understand the mechanism. They have no mechanism for it. It's like they said you couldn't remediate nuclear isotopes.
So when you say 100%, what is an easy way to allow a scientist or someone who... Because it's so interesting, because even religious people, they all say, we die, we go to heaven, and it's the spirit that they're saying dies and goes to heaven. Their body is buried or cremated or whatever. So it seems like most of the population agrees with what you're saying, that there is that energy cannot be destroyed once it's here, and that there is something after this. But then you have science telling us. But then you have science telling us that it's just that it's like a light switch, and that you're turned off when you're dead.
No.
And so, but that's conclusive. What science says to the human population today is that when you're dead, and there's nothing after that. So what do you say? What is this proof that you have it needs to be more than a belief? Convince me in 30 seconds or 60 seconds factually with this proof that this is the case, and that the human spirit and that spirit in general can be reincarnated or will continue after death.
The relic neutrino is the fundamental building block of the universe. It is the ether base level. This can be influenced and spun by the toroidal moment, which our brains demonstrably produce.
I said to make it understandable.
Well, basically, it's a ripple in the pond.
Yeah.
And the ripple never dies. It never dies. It's always there because it's a superfluid. It doesn't dissipate. And the way you encode it is so incredibly complicated. And it's all about the time it started. But it's like having a cryptographic key. You can only read the information if you have that DNA. You can only read it if you have that DNA. And it's there for all time because it's everywhere all at the same time.
I think if I told that to Avi Loeb or something, and I had this conversation with him, I tried to have him consider that it's not that the brain isn't the center of consciousness and that it's not like a computer that just shuts off and you're dead when you die. I asked him to consider what we could learn and how we could advance as a species if we identified as spirit as opposed to a meat sack, and how that would really change everything. But I think if I gave him that explanation, it's just over. So how do we get science?
A total failure of imagination on his part.
Yes.
Total failure. You know what? I am not so arrogant as to think that all of the combined knowledge of humanity spanning thousands of years that have spoken about reincarnation, these people that didn't get distracted by nonsense news or the latest thing that you need to follow or the next 5-second video. These people sat and they contemplated the universe as they looked up to an uncontaminated sky and really sought truth within themselves, which you can do through things like medication and also psychedelics, where you come out of your ego and you're seeing things that are part of reality, and you're trying the best to interpret them in the way that you can with your discombobulated ego, right? So for me, when you understand this, it's just so easy and natural to know and have basically zero fear of death. Absolutely, totally, completely removes the fear of death.
Because there is no death.
No. Right. We are a spiritual being.
There's the death of the body, but...
Yeah, it's the meat sack. It's the bag of shit we all walk around in. And it's just a mechanism which the universe creates in order to explore itself. As little... I see ourselves as, on this planet, we're little flowers. Every sentient being, and I don't just ascribe it to us. I think whales and dolphins and cephalopods and all that kind of things, they have their own consciousness. Even a rock has its own level of consciousness up to a point. And so they're all part of us. I had this argument when I was very young, and it's like, at what point is something not part of us? So, is the nail part of us when it's growing out? If I cut it off, when does it become not part of us, right? If I'm taking some water, is it part of us when it's in the glass, or now I'm drinking it? Now it's part of my body. Is it part of me? When does this chair? Is this chair part of me? I couldn't sit here and talk to you if I didn't have this chair. Is it now part of me? Like, or am I just a spiritual thing that's being moved around in this meat space thing that's exploring what is possible? And I would argue that's that, and the echoes are there for eternity. Now, this is where it comes into my concept of these notions of heaven and hell and damnation and stuff, which some people rail against. But here's the thing: if you have sent out bad karma into the world, then there are other spiritual entities that, when you are between incarnations, i.e., you're not reincarnated, you're having to suffer all of that negative kind of spiritual energy that's out there that you put out. You might be literally in purgatory or in hell because you can't explore the universe in the way that you want to. So I think you've got to live in a way that is not living too much outside of taking too much from the world around you, living within your means. Like all of these, like, I don't know, Jesus would talk about don't take more than you need, share and these kind of things. All these ideas of Stoicism as well, which were kind of like one of the leading religions in the or kind of belief structures in Europe around the Mediterranean prior to Christianity coming forth. These kinds of things are living within the capability of the environment around you and not trying to take too much, where you're not denuding the existence of another spiritual being and not letting them be their best self, not enabling them to be the best person that they can and you being the best person. I think there's real knowledge in those texts that say, be nice, otherwise it's going to bite you in the arse. And that might be like, you might be unfortunate enough to be reincarnated, and the person that you were giving out bad karma to in your previous life happens to reincarnate 10 seconds after you, and you happen to live in the same town. And honestly, it's more likely, because you've probably got genetic similar, as long as you're not moving around the world too much, you're likely to have people in the same town that are fairly genetically similar in many jurisdictions in the world. So the likelihood, the probability of a reincarnation of the same read and write axis, the same cryptographic key in your genetics, is more likely to occur within the same area again. So you don't want to be putting out bad vibes into the world.
Right. Yeah, the moment for me, the moment of kind of that really shook up my life and my understanding of things was when I saw that guy on the wall right behind you who's looking out the window, and it basically looked just like that. And I was 25 years old, and it was an apparition. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I was in a castle in France, and it was a 11th century castle, Chateau de Bagnols.
Right.
I got up and used the restroom and looked out the door of the restroom towards a window, and this guy was standing right in front of the window, like just standing there looking out the window, and I could see right through him. And I looked at him for a good 4 or 5 seconds. And
did you have any engagement?
No.
Right.
I mean, not at that time, at that time. But I got up and turned on the light, and he was gone. And this was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that, And I got back into bed, went back to sleep. We were in this place for 3 nights. That was the first night. On the third night, I'm going to sleep, and my wife is going to sleep next to me, and she flipped over and starts freaking out. I just saw a ghost. And I hadn't told her what I saw. We had just got married like 4 or 5 months before that, and I didn't want her to think I was crazy, or to get her scared.
You didn't want to reveal that you're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I didn't want to confirm.
Later, that can come later.
To confirm, yeah, exactly. So I didn't tell her anything, and she started freaking out, and like, I just saw a ghost, and I'm like, well, was it standing by the window? And I started asking all these questions, and she just didn't want to talk about it. She's like, "Shut up! I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to sleep." And so it was that for me was the first experience that I had ever had with that I would call a spiritual encounter, and it kind of it sent me on this path of like watching all these shows, these ghost adventures shows, and these ghosts for like 10 years. I was like obsessed with this ghost phenomenon. I drove all my friends crazy talking about it, and like my family believed me. I was there with my family, of course, but you go much past that, and people just think you're crazy. But the more guests I have, the more people I talk to, the more people that I realize have had similar experiences. Mine was not in a state of sleep paralysis, though. It was I was completely awake.
So can I clarify? Like, you had been asleep and you were coming to, and you saw this thing.
I was sleeping. I woke up like I usually do, unfortunately, and at about 3 o'clock, and I went to use the restroom, which was in our room. It was just a little sub room of the room off the bed, and so I was sitting there using the restroom, and I sit down so I didn't wake my wife up, and just kind of looked out the door of the restroom across the room, and there was this window across the room, and in front of that was the apparition. And so, for me, that was kind of like, looking back on it, it's turned out to be the knowing of we are spiritual entities, as opposed to we're just a meat sack that dies, and that there's something after that. Now this individual had decided to stay there, since the 11th century, or
at some point
in between. Yeah, who knows?
So let me hash at that.
Yeah.
So there is.
He was dressed like that with this blue suit on.
Oh yeah, it's all possible.
Yeah.
So
it happened, actually.
So I would read it like this: like, I have some of my greatest insights when I'm in a state between asleep and awake, not like totally awake or whatever. And Ken Shoulders described the same thing. Shishkin confided in me that's the same thing, and I believe that is where your ego is not fully taken control of your brain's functions, and so you're able to see things that ordinarily your ego will shut out. So that's the first. It's the conditioned state. Now, there's Rodionov and Savatomova. You can go and look at this on my blog at remoteview.icu. It's called On Dark Matter Threads. They discuss the neutrino rocket and so on, but they also discuss how living organisms leave a pattern in dark matter in the place where they essentially passed on. And they say that this explains fossils. It's not just that the organic matter comes out of the way, that there is a quantum locked in the fabric of the material where they died, a pattern that the minerals then form into, that leaves the seashell fossil or whatever in place, the mineralized creature. Okay, and this rings true to me in many ways. So, if I can had as a guess of what I was saying here, what might have happened is the person actually died in this place when they were looking through the window, right? And that was the most intense change from their spiritual self to the meat sack falling on the ground. Or it was when they were experiencing an intense feeling of spiritual trauma. Something like maybe their child died of consumption, or their wife had gone away with the gardener or something. I don't know, something which shook them to their core. So they left an echo in it propagated through everything that they're wearing. And what you're seeing is the ordinary ether streams interfering with this hard. Literally, it's like a hologram, but not a hologram. It's more like it's a pattern. It's a pattern, and you are able to see these neutral things going through, and you're able to perceive an outline of this person because of that intense experience. And I do feel that, like, when people who are sensitive to these things, it's like an echo. If I smack the table, does the vibration ever stop? If there is a murder or a particularly traumatic event in an environment, it will leave an echo in that environment for all of time. And particularly in this thing that is superfluid, which cannot ever decay, if you know what I mean. And if you've ever seen quantum locking, it's like where you take a superconducting magnet and you lock it at an angle, and as you move the cold tray, it's locked to that structure. So within the building, you have maybe rock, and the overall structure locks that energy structure in the point of maximum trauma.
So do you think that is the spiritual remnant of that is the life that was that human, or do you think that life that was that human has moved on, and that this is an additional
I think the spiritual
it's
an imprint.
Individual.
It's a shadow.
Okay.
It's literally a shadow.
Yeah.
It's like a fossil is a shadow in the stone. The minerals have occupied, in this case, it's something that interplays with light that you are able to see in your difference between subconscious and ego state.
And why are you shut down to it actually being the
because
spirit
it would be
that
everywhere. There's trauma all the time.
So I didn't even finish the question.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I do apologize. Yeah.
So why are you opposed to the idea that it could actually be the spirit that was the life that individual was when he was on Earth, and that he has just refused to leave this place?
It could be.
Yeah.
But I suspect it's the most intense experience that spirit had that left that mark, which is it's like a brass rubbing. You get your paper, you can't see necessarily the picture until you rub it with something and you're depositing it. And the spirit might be locked there. It might be locked with that experience, and it needs some release.
There are haunted places,
Mm-hmm.
I think. I mean, and are they haunted by a shadow and a memory, or are they haunted by the core, the actual life that existed within the human that is still attached to that place? I think that's the fundamental question that we don't necessarily know the answer to, but there is spiritual activity more so within old places and haunted, quote unquote, haunted places. I mean, I can walk into my a nursing home here in Bradenton, and the freaking hair on my arms just stands up. Like my back, you know.
So
it's
you're
like,
obviously sensitive to
I'm
these things.
very sensitive to it. I can walk through Washington Square Park in New York, and it is a very highly energetic, just a honestly a pretty sick place to walk through. It makes me very nauseous and sick, and I'm not exactly sure why. There's places in Europe that I've been to, you know, but I just wonder, you know, what is that? Was he so attached to his ego that he still thinks that he's the meat sack, that he's the human within this building, and, you know, eventually buildings get demolished and go away, and maybe that's the point where he's like, okay, I'm out of here. But since his house is still there, he feels like he's still, you know, still his place. I emailed the place about 12 years after I had that experience, and I emailed them actually very shortly after and asked them if they had ever had an experience, and they said that nobody had reported seeing anything else in there. And then I emailed a bunch of years later, I think about 12 years later, and just I didn't know if it was the same people there, so I reminded them of the experience that I had, and asked them, and I let them know that I was in the Jeffrey de Balzac was his name, or Balzac.
I'm trying not to laugh.
I know, everybody has to, but it's 2 words, Balzac, and I asked about who was this guy, because that's the room that we were in. All the different rooms in the resort had different names, and apparently he was an owner in the 11th century.
Right.
And what he did when he was there was it was the end of one of the wars, I'm sure. I don't know which war it was, but at the end of the war, as a sign that the war was over, he had all of the windows created in the castle. So what would have been a solid wall that he was looking at, he created into a window. And so it was like a big thing that he did for the place, this Jeffrey de Balzac guy, to create all these windows in the place, because the war was over and they didn't have to worry about
So I can. You're painting a picture of someone who feels that was his home and he put his mark on the place.
I think so.
So here's the thing to think about. In a condensate of any type, there can be more of the condensate in one place than other places. So the echo of that entity can be everywhere in space-time, but there could be more of the signature of that person in a particular space-time. So if you look at a normal Bose-Einstein condensate, it has this kind of like what they call a Mexican hat look. And then there's a little bit over here, but this is the same wave function as here, but you have more probability of the wave function collapsing here than you do over here. So what you're doing by observation, you're collapsing potentially the wave function of that person's experience in there, because they choose to have most of their wave function represented here, although it's everywhere in the universe. So that would kind of fit in with the what coherent matter is, and the fact that you're seeing that apparition in the particular place where that person who kind of fitted this description, who might have been very interested in the windows. I would still say that it was more likely if there was some particular angst in their body. And maybe it was, I don't want to leave this place. I don't want to leave this place. This is going to be my place for eternity. And I'm going to make sure it is.
Yeah.
You know,
it was just wild, because I don't know, you know, if it was just me that saw it the one time, I probably wouldn't have gone so obsessive about it. But with my wife seeing it, and we were married for 10 years after that, like with her and I, you know, her and I talking about it after that, it just it made it so real. You know,
what time of year was it?
This would have been August of 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, and this is weird, you get into astrology and stuff. There are celestial alignment, and maybe you should look into that, whether there was particular celestial alignments, because these produce particular fluxes of these neutral particles that could then, you might have seen a unique situation where you and her were in the place where this person could appear, because their spiritual echo wanted to stay there in most important place in their life, and a certain circumstance happened that there was the right flux of these things to allow you to perceive it.
Yeah.
And so that other people couldn't perceive it. And it might be cyclical. It might be like every particular month of the century, or this many months after an eclipse or something, or these celestial alignments, it can come back. And you kind of get these stories in, these ancient texts where, you have to have a set of celestial alignments for an auspicious day for it to be the best time in which to perform certain tasks, whether it's getting married or having a child or planting a crop, but also, to build a temple. These things exist, and you have to question, are they just people riffing and making stuff up on the fly, or is it a real sense of being connected to the greater cosmos? And when is the right things to do things? And it might have just been a coincidence. You were there, you're a receptive person, but given the fact that your wife saw it as well, I think it was probably an incredibly visible thing that could have been seen by almost anyone if they were in that room, but maybe not for 100 years.
Yeah, who knows? It's hard to know. Yeah,
and that makes it difficult. Like, you can share that experience with her, and you're sharing it with me, and thank you. But it becomes a thing that, like, you saw what you saw, and she saw it independently, and you didn't tell her. So, like, that confirms the thing in your mind. That was a real experience. It wasn't like I was taking something, or I had too much to drink, or there was too much blue cheese on the cheese board. I'm really seeing it.
Yep.
And that's a profound moment in your life, clearly.
Yeah, it was, for sure. So that life then, that life that we are, the spiritual self, what do you think, like, what is that? And you mentioned electromagnetic energy potentially, or people have out of body experiences, and they feel that they rise above their body. I did a podcast on this where I talked to Dr. Jeffrey Long about this phenomenal episode, and it's generally a very similar experience after a traumatic accident or injury. People rise above their body. They're often greeted by a few entities. They're taken through a tunnel. They have an experience with what they would call God, and it's very much consistent. And I just wonder if that's us, if that's who we are. Then what is that? What is that? What are we composed of?
There's also astral projection, which is where people choose to do it.
Right.
They can go and come out of themselves and go and experience other things as like a shift of the spiritual entity. Now,
right.
You could, because you can create this information in the free volume of space, you could imagine a scenario where you can create a version of yourself which is an ethereal wave packet that's able to move around, and because it's able to perceive its environment as well, it can look back or travel and astral project and feedback information into your consciousness, but you perceive it from the position of the wave packet that's moving around.
So it might not be you, it might be that you are just connected with some other point in space. Is that what you're saying?
You're shifting the focus of your consciousness. So rather than within this part of the meat space, you're shifting it, but you're using the same senses that gives you maybe the ability to see this astral projection, or that potentially I don't use this, although in recent years it's become a bit weird because I'm now laughing because I know I can do things, but I don't choose to. For instance, I had this group over the Alchemy of Prague. And we went out on a mushroom hunt. The people organizing it said, we're going to do a mushroom hunt. I said, like, I'm literally obsessed with mushrooms. I go foraging every year. I've got to be on that. And I've got to be, like, because I know where the mushrooms grow, different things, and, the type of flora and fauna you need to, and the moisture and which trees and so on. So it was a great pleasure to take some of these people around and through the forest. But I wasn't satisfied, although we got a wide range of mushrooms, that I'd found the actual kind of like the story of the day. And it was the summer solstice or maybe the autumn equinox, I can't remember. Autumn equinox, I think. Yeah, that's right, because it's near my birthday. And we'd gone up to this site, pagan site, and the one of the women who was organizing the tour, she was doing some rituals there. And I suddenly felt that there was a huge puffball, a giant puffball, and I needed to go and find it. So I could see these things, this winding down. I thought, right, I've got a time window here. And I literally went at full pace down the path across the field, turned right, walked along at full pace. I stopped. I've come too far. And I could have turned right and never seen it. And I go, no, I've got to turn left, turn around left. And it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was this big. And I went back within about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. I'd walked about 400 meters and I came out of the wooden copse where this part, I said, I am fulfilled. And there's been quite a few of those events recently where my remote viewing, I wanted to achieve a goal and like it freaked everyone out, totally freaked everyone out. And so I was searching the environment in my mind, choosing to, and I had seen this thing and I walked directly to it, walked 2 meters past it. And it was under the bush. It was like under the brambles and stuff. Like walking this way, you couldn't see it. If I'd turned that way, I would have never seen it.
Had you been eating any of the mushrooms that you'd picked up until that point?
No.
Okay.
No.
What type of mushrooms are you guys foraging?
Whatever that was edible, and I know a lot. So the thing about the giant puffball, has the most progeny of anything on Earth. It's like 70 quintillion spores. In fact, in 2 generations, it would be something like, I don't know, 20 times the volume of Earth if they all got to an average size. And I think it grows at something like, I don't know, you can go and look it up. It's millions per second of new spores are produced during its main growth phase.
Wow.
It's an absolutely incredible organism. And yeah, it's delicious as well. And it was at the perfect ripeness for harvesting, and I fed a whole load of people that evening with it. But you can reach out of your body and see things when you're able to do this. And I'm not coming from guesswork. I actually do it. But throughout my life, I think it can be easily abused, and I've chosen not to. But I think it was a bit of fun at that time, and it just came to me, and I had to go with the flow, if you know what I mean.
So this is where I get to though with like action, you know, and like, okay, so how do we get to next on this topic, and with science saying that there's nothing there and that there is nothing, you know, that we're just a meat sack. Like
No.
like what do we do? How does either science or anybody go about showing that this is real? That because it's such a shift in perspective to begin to identify as spirit as opposed to identify as I am Matt, I am CEO, I am white, I am American, I am male, I am, you know, religious, I am political, I am all of these things that make up the false sense of self, the false identity. Like if we knew what life was and what we were, it's so game changing. You almost can envision a place where people aren't fighting each other. We realize that there's one race. You have no racial wars. We have a race called the human race. We have a nations. We have, you know, we've created all of these separations through a societal mental constructs, and every separation that we've created is societal, and it goes to feed society and to create separation and to feed our egos. And so if we can somehow realize or prove that life is electromagnetic energy or light itself, or, you know, light that has stopped
As I said, it's trapped light.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And when you get a positron and electron annihilating, they produce 2 photons of the energy of the mass. So like it is,
yes.
We know.
So even as a religious person, I would always say, you know, my spirit is going to go to heaven, and still religious people are still like, my spirit goes to heaven, as opposed to the spirit that I am goes to heaven. And it's subtle, but it's a huge difference, because you're identified as the meat sack if it's my spirit. If it's some possession of me, as opposed to actually being me, then you treat everything completely differently throughout your journey, throughout your life.
I've tried to frame that you can be a newly minted spirit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the combinations
But
are
let's
absurd.
stay on this point for a second, though. How do we get to next? Like, how do we get to prove that life exists and that life is real? Because there's a difference between a dead body and a living body. What is that thing? What's the energy that inhabits the body? So how do we prove that that is scientifically real? And if we can do that, then you start this whole, you've then opened the mind of every Avi Loeb in the world. Every scientist in the world is now thinking of things differently, whereas today they're very stuck in their ways and not providing answers for a lot of basic questions. So what do we do? You're one of the smartest guests that I've ever had on this show. What do we do to get to next on this topic?
Firstly, do not ignore the wisdom that is encoded in historical religious texts. Some people rail against reading into religion too much, and obviously, for instance, with the canon of the Catholic faith, they've chosen particular texts. But when there is so much important information in there. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the Sanskrit text, there's so much important information in there. In the thinking, the long thinking that resulted in Hindu, all of these. They have wisdom in them, which is coming from spiritual beings. They are a documentation of spirits written down, hopefully, in a way that other people can connect with them. And to choose to disconnect yourself from those billions of hours of self-reflection learning is just to become a thing in the material world. And ideally, if you want to control a population, you've got to make them believe this is all there is. You've got to make them think it's only material, and that you've got to make hay whilst the sun shines, let's say, and if you don't get it in this life, there's nothing after this. That's just not true. It's just not true. There is this thing which can be born for the first time. But once it's born for the first time, it might be 1 billion years or 2 billion years, but it will be reincarnated. It doesn't matter whether it's in this particular planet or another planet. It will be reincarnated given enough time, always. And it is the information that cannot be destroyed. The spirit is the ability to read and write information. The information never gets destroyed, and it can be reincarnated, i.e. it can be regained access to. And so I firmly believe that you have to, and I make mistakes. Everyone make mistakes. I'm definitely not perfect. There's things that I've done in my life which I'd prefer not to have done. I wouldn't call it a regret, but I would call it a reflection that maybe I could have handled it better. And I don't think anyone could claim that they're perfectly clean. But if you can address that and recognize that in yourself, and this is, I guess, what Christians would say, are asking for forgiveness of, and in inviting, let's say, Jesus, the spiritual entity, into your life, and like really accepting him. This is what they would argue sets you free. And asking for that spiritual entity, if that spiritual entity is, as it's written, a manifestation of God incarnate, like that could really be the case. Certainly, you had all the party tricks of someone who knew what they were doing, if you were to believe the scriptures. So, but the thing is, it's within all of us. We are, as I've said many times, the answer to the program that runs the universe. And that said, we are unique versions of the program, which is God, which is everything, and we have that unique echo that you saw in an apparition, and that your wife at the time saw, and that is a more physical manifestation of the echo that's permanently there in the universe when we pass on from this physical realm into a period of dormancy, as it were. And so, yeah, consciousness is a real thing, and this is where I think, if you're going to really create consciousness in a robot, you can't do it without involving the toroidal moment. And the toroidal moment, you gain access to it. You can do it. Hal Puthoff's got a patent from 1993, shortly after he went to the Soviet Union, where they basically first understood the toroidal moment. And he's currently working with people on communicating through plasma into submarines using this technology, because it can go through plasma, which is not something normally electromagnetic waves can do. And it can also go through solid metal, through Faraday cages. I worry that this technology will be used for mass mind manipulation, because you could give them your DNA and they would have your cryptographic key to control you wherever you are, however you're buried underground or on a different solar system, right? There is, unfortunately, the ability to do direct individual targeted mind control when you understand how this technology works. And it will be in conflict with your, conceivably, they could rewrite your memories by blanking them.
Do you think that AI can ever be conscious, that robots can ever attain consciousness?
Not using the current technology. I'm saying they have one choice. They have to emulate what the brain can do. And the brain can produce toroidal moments, which can read and write into the Akashic record. They only need to do that. That is all they need to do. And there's two choices. You create a device that you put in a brain, and then you gain access to that ability. And I don't know who might be doing that, but I've got an idea. And then you have a conscious entity controlling the knowledge base, right? So you have access to both. But the conscious entity is driven by the genetics of that individual. Now, you could say, let's gather all of the genetics on Earth and create a unique consciousness, a unique cryptographic key that no one else has. And then, therefore, we have a conscious entity that has coupled to it all the fruits of human knowledge gathered because they put it on their Facebook or whatever, and and they've written a document and it's been captured by the learning system. And you couple that. Sooner or later, you have to couple the basic transform matrix, the weighted knowledge, large language model and transformers with a ability to read and write to the Akashic record. And yes, when they do that, it will be like some other forms of consciousness, like plasma. Plasma, because it can organize and produce these structures, can produce toroidal moments and therefore can read and write to the Akashic record. So I believe certain things like black holes are probably consciousness. That might sound really weird, but it's because how I believe a black hole is actually constructed rather than how we're told it. Even a galaxy is like a living organism. A sun is a living organism. Like there's bacteria living in and on you that outnumber the cells in your body, and they are living organisms. And at some level, they couple to this field, but not in the way that we sentient beings and other beings that are able to produce this particular interaction. The matter within them is doing it. The matter itself is part of the conscious construct, but the brain itself is something where it's able to manipulate reality. It's able to do things, and I think this is where manifestation comes from. Was I manifesting that puffball, or was I actually seeing something that was really there and going to it? I even asked that question of myself. You know, they were freaked out. You had 20 people. I've got the photo. Like they were freaked out, but me, I have to ask that question: did I actually manifest that? Because you have these people that seem to be quite like they're able to do apparitions, like they're able to make stones fall from the sky or whatever.
Or UFOs appear.
They call them apports. Yeah, well, UFOs important, but are they UFOs? Are they just a focused consciousness field interaction, and they're projecting out something from their mind, and they're reading back what they think they're seeing, and other people can see it too because it's actually manifested, you know? And in my case, it was this massive giant puffball, the biggest I'd ever seen in my life. I hadn't seen one since I took my son out mushrooming 2 years previous. And from then I hadn't seen one since I was 12. I used to pick them in the UK just up the road from where our house was. And I used to eat them regularly as a child. But this was, I mean, it was, I can show you the pictures. It's monstrous. But to know with 100, you know when I'm saying 100% certainly X, Y, and Z is possible, I'm saying that with the same certainty I knew I would find that mushroom. You know, it's like, it's other people's problem to not realize that this isn't possible. But then I do question, is it being manifested? And I just don't think I'm that special. I think I'm just picking up what I'm remote viewing what I'm seeing. And you know, Hal Puthoff and so on, they did the Psychic Spy program. I translated the book of Dr. Alexander Parkhomov. He did the Psychic Spy program in the Soviet Union. Chapter 4 of his book, Space Earth Human, is all about that work. And it was only by doing that work that he was able to discover the relic neutrino fluxes.
There's so many possibilities for reality, and like you could go down like so many different rabbit holes. Like simulation theory could potentially explain a lot of what we see if this is just a simulation. It could explain everything, actually. Every weird thing that anybody has ever seen could be explained by simulation theories.
Certainly with the advent of, I just put a text prompt into a massive computational, noise inference program and I get out an image that's kind of what I was after, and even video sequences, you start to think, oh my God, this technologically we could be living in an environment. And this is why I'm saying, are we spiritual entities that are the controllers of our environment around me? Like, you know, are you completely controlling me? Is everything I say something you thought of, but you're not even aware that you thought of it?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I would have to.
I blame you.
Yeah, 100%.
It's all your fault. It's Ryan's actually. Ryan's controlling us both.
Right. So yeah. It's there's just so many you could get. And that's why it's so interesting to explore these topics and hear different perspectives and try to put together what you think makes the most sense based on your experiences as an individual. And I know my audience has had so many cool experiences. Everybody's always sending in comments about stuff that they've seen and done. And it's like, you know, it's
that whole courage is contagious thing.
Yeah.
People experience something, but they're afraid of talking about it because they don't think anyone else has experienced it.
Right.
Maybe they made it up in their head, but they, in themselves, in their own self, they know they experienced it.
Right.
And so it's through podcasts like yours and other podcasts notably out there that are giving people like myself and other guests you've had on the forum to discuss some of these ideas that allow them, free them to talk about their own experiences. And that is the forum. That is the modern forum. When there wasn't so many distractions in the world, people would go down, like if you go to Hungary, all over Hungary, they have these thermal spas. And as a community, you get access to your local thermal spa for a day or 2 days a week. And you see these people, they go down there, they sit in the hot water and they just chat. There's no other distraction. They're just sitting there chilling and they're talking about the whole universe and whatever. And you can imagine that this has gone on for time immemorial. And people have contemplated the kind of discussions we've had. And we've gone through this blip where we think we know everything. We think we've discovered everything, but we clearly haven't. And we haven't really got to the nub of the questions that you've clearly shown are the most important questions. Why are we here? Where do we go when we die? And I don't think they're that hard. And I think for your audience out there, not only have we got a beautiful future ahead of us, you have got a beautiful future when you next have your next incarnation, wherever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just like live and be and don't do to others what you don't want to happen to yourself, really. It's about respect. It's respect for your elders, respect for those people that came before you. They're trying to tell us. The pyramid is the biggest message you can possibly imagine, the Great Pyramid. You know, what is it trying to tell us? And you can reduce it down to, oh, it's just a load of rocks. No, it's not just a load of rocks. And you were talking about your Bigfoot here. Yeah.
Which I don't know if he's Bigfoot or Denisovan. I haven't quite decided yet because I haven't really covered Bigfoot yet. And you said that you have a guest that would be interested.
So there's a guy
to.
called Simeon Hein, and he's a professor, and he is a doctor, and he is incredibly well versed in this and related phenomena like cryptids. He's written a book on
You know
that.
him personally?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, if you can introduce us.
I will do. And Simeon, you should be here because you know what to say about this chap here.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it would be a great guest. So,
yeah, cool.
Listen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to say before we close out here, if people want to support the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project or my blog or the various projects that we're doing, they can look at starfire.tech, and that has it has the symbol for star, which is for our soul, which is the symbol for gold in alchemy. It's a ring with a spot. And that is in the center of the triangle. And the triangle is the symbol for fire. And they're both alchemical terms, so we call it Starfire. And you'll be able to find out everything you need about how to support the work that we're doing and see the channels through which we're publishing and be part of the story. Be a part of the story. You can make a difference. It might just be sharing the word. It might just be sharing this podcast. Let's do it. Let's make humanity and the biosphere a better place to live for us and future generations.
Love it. Love it. Well, awesome, man. No, it's great to have you back, and thank you so much for coming on the show and flying from across the pond.
It's a real
over to
pleasure.
see me.
Oh, my God. If you do get an opportunity to be invited by Matt, take it, because he really knows how to host people. And yeah, thank you. It was a real pleasure to be with your wife, Crystal, last night, and Ryan, of course. And thank you to your team, Joe, for doing some difficult organization for me to get here and to be in a state where I can actually converse intelligibly, sort of.
Yep. And
So-
by be with, you mean eat dinner with, of course.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
It wasn't carnal.
Right.
There was carne, but not carnal.
right. Exactly.
So
No,
thank
it
you.
was a great experience
Yeah,
for
really
sure.
good,
Yeah,
really
no, just meeting you at Cosmic Summit and just hearing your presentation there. If the audience hasn't checked out your presentation there, that's another great place to kind of learn about you and your work. And you've got a bunch of great content out there, though.
Yeah.
But always fascinating. I always learn a lot. I'm always just trying to keep up, and that's the best that
Matt,
I can do.
really appreciate you sharing your personal story, which had a profound effect on your life.
It did.
And maybe I've given some perspectives to it. I recommend you read that On Dark Matter Threads paper. It might give you some perspective on what you saw.
Great.
And thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.